Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. How are you? How are you? I see that right now it's should be morning time in Los Angeles, so good morning to everyone on the West Coast. It's just past noon in New York, and we are now in the evening time in Europe and Asia. So good morning, good evening. Welcome to all of you. I see we've got about 700 people watching. Please make sure you've hit the like button because I only see half that number. I just see 300 likes. Most importantly, tell me where you guys are tuning in from. I'm waiting for the comment section to explode. And that's our first order of business before I delve into these subjects. I've got so much crap lined up for you guys. There are so many things to talk about. It's outrageous. It's outrageous. Completely outrageous. There we go. Look, we've got people tuning in from Germany, Brazil, Canada, Mexico, Russia, Ethiopia, the UK, Iran, Italy, Canada, Netherlands. I can't keep up. Scotland, Denmark, Massachusetts. It's exploding. Croatia, South Carolina, Seattle, Tehran. That's amazing. That's amazing. Well, welcome to all of you. That's really great. I love you guys. Shout out to all of your countries. And it's a true pleasure. This gives me great joy to see that. So, what shall we start with? Well, I thought we might address what's happening in Iran first. But it's kind of weird saying that because there is no first. Everything is intertwined, right? Everything is connected, including the protests in Iran. Because you might think that that's just about... it's just it just randomly happened. It didn't. I think the timing of it is quite suspect, and I'll get into that in a second. So let me pull this up and just let us begin. Oh, my watch is already buzzing. We've already got someone who joined on Patreon. Thank you very much to Jody. Okay, Jody, I will play you a crab dance after the first segment. Let me get through this, and then I'll play you one. Thank you for supporting the show. You're very kind. Everybody show Jody some love. So, okay, let me talk about what's happening in Iran. Let me try and break down what's happening in Iran. Now, in a nutshell, this woman who you see in the photograph here, her name is Mahsa Amini. She died, and she died in police custody in Iran, and you've had protests that have, broken out as a result. And this has gone from the police killed this woman to let's remove the hijab in Iran to let's destroy the whole Iranian regime, right? It's escalated from that point. And obviously, I'm going to give it to you straight. If you think that the United States, if you think that the MEK, if you think that Iran's enemies are not somehow involved with the protests, and I'm not saying that, what happened to this woman is 100% clear, but if you think that they haven't jumped on this opportunity to mess with Iran, then you have not been paying attention. You just don't understand what's going on. Now let's go through the facts. Through the facts. The Iranian government, when they saw that people are protesting because she was detained by the morality police for improper dress. Now, I don't know what they were referring to, if it was her hijab or something else that she was wearing, but they released the CCTV footage. So I'm going to show you the footage. This is what they put out, okay? So they've circled her in red. Right, and she gets up, and then you'll see in a moment she suddenly collapses for no reason. I don't understand what happened there exactly, but yeah, you can see they're telling her off because of her clothing, and then she's feeling physically unwell and collapses. So that alone to me leads me to believe there's more to this story than they're telling. Okay. Let me show you the rest of the footage. There's some more footage. I don't know if you guys have seen this. It's when she's being taken away in an ambulance. Yeah, you can see her being carried here. So she's being carried away, and then she's put into an ambulance, and that's all we have. That's it. Now, my understanding, and I've seen this in many, many outlets, is that the proof, the quote-unquote evidence that she was beaten by the police comes from her father. Her father said that, I'll read it to you from the BBC. Her father said that she was basically with her his daughter and his, so Mahsa and his son were together, and they were both beaten. That's what he's saying, okay? This is what he's saying. So Miss Amini's father said that he was not allowed by authorities to see all of her body after it had been wrapped for burial, and just her face and feet were visible. He said there were bruises on her feet, and he asked doctors to examine it, but he never heard back from them. And there's basically this back and forth going on where you have the director, so this is Tehran's director of forensic medicine, he's saying that she had pre-existing health issues, and her father responding by saying, no, that's not true. She's never been to a hospital in the last 22 years. And, you know, that's basically what they've been saying. Also, the fact that the Iranian health officials are saying she had an operation on a brain tumor or something when she was 8 years old. So I don't know whether either of these things are true. I'm just telling you what both sides are saying, what her family are saying and what the Iranian government are saying. What I have in front of me, what I've just shown to you, all we have is this video, okay? All we have is this video of her collapsing before she's taken anywhere. So you guys explain that to me. Explain to me why, if she was beaten, why did she collapse? Are those two things related? Maybe both are true, but for the moment, we only have the video. Now, in response, I'm just going to show you some of these protests. This is what people have been doing in the streets. So you have women like cutting off their hair in this example. You've had other women, going in the streets and basically like ripping off their headscarves, their hijab, in protest, and saying that, it's not just about her being killed. The whole thing has to go. Because she was detained by morality police. So their logic is that not only the hijab has to go, the whole government has to go. This whole Islamic republic has to go. Now, what does that sound like to you? Who does that sound like to you? That sounds like Israel. That sounds like the United States. That sounds like everyone who does not like Iran for various reasons. So you have people that are really like dying for an opportunity to jump into Iran's internal politics. And this is one of them. It's like with Syria, when you had the war starting in Syria in 2011, the original claims, what were they? You had people protesting and they were killed by the government, right? And then it went from that, this claim, to, hey, let's give weapons to Al-Qaeda. Hold on a second. So a boy or a woman or someone is mistreated by the government, and then you want to jump to like arming people inside the country. That's a bit of an escalation, right? That's a bit sharp, isn't it? And I was so stunned. I thought this can't be a coincidence. Look what I found in the New York Times. I was stunned. So this was published just a few days ago, September 19th, and they're saying the Pentagon is ordering a review of its overseas social media campaigns. Okay? So I just want to read you a paragraph here. You're going to love this. Twitter and Facebook over the summer shut down misleading accounts that they determined were sending messages about U.S. foreign policy interests abroad. Okay? One campaign targeting Iran spread divisive messages about life there. The accounts involved pushed out views that both supported and opposed the Iranian government. That disinformation effort resembled the methods used by Russia to influence the 2016 U.S. presidential election. For years, U.S. military commands have promoted pro-American news and messages for audiences overseas, sometimes earning the scrutiny of Congress. And these programs have gone further, though, right? You'll also see that they're talking about messages that are, addressing the way of life in Iran, and it's clearly aimed at the internal politics. And so I find this really weird that they decided to disclose this right at the moment where you're having these protests in Iran, because people are definitely protesting. I mean, I can just show you some more footage. Look, I've got so many things here. It's just endless videos, honestly. These are more extreme. So, in this video, they're, quote, burning the statue of Iran's Supreme Leader Khamenei in his hometown of Mashhad. So the Iranian government have been saying that these are not protests, they're riots. And I saw one report, this is from the health ministry, they said that 60 ambulances have been destroyed. Now, I can't verify that, but I've seen enough videos of things and people being set on fire. When I say people, I'm not kidding. There's a video published by The Telegraph, so that's a UK outlet. They're saying that there's a policeman in Iran who was set on fire. I couldn't find any other outlets saying that, but I wouldn't be surprised, because here's the death toll so far. You've had about 4 police officers that have been killed, and they're saying in total it's 35. So they're saying most of those are protesters, and a good chunk of them are security forces. So I mean, again, I can't help but think that this is like in Syria. They were saying that the government is killing people, and then the people who work as police or whatever, or security, they were being killed as well. And then they use this as sort of the spearhead to, to ram in all of these other programs, like, starting funding for terrorist groups and so on. That's how it starts, right? You have something something bad that's happened in the country, and they come and exploit that. So what I'm saying is, I don't know for sure if she was beaten or not beaten, because the only evidence we have is the CCTV video. Okay, that's all we have. If it did happen, then they should bring the people who beat her. I mean, what else do you do with those people? You put them on trial, right? You have to. And the Iranian president, he phoned her family. This is what he said. So in a phone conversation with the family of Mahsa Amini, who died in the custody of the morality police, he ordered an investigation and a special inquiry. We'll see what happens, but I can't help but notice some of these similar tactics, and it's kind of cringy on some other points. I'm not going to say, I'm not going to name names, but you have people jumping in and trying to make this a conversation about hijab. Let me just say something. There is a difference between the hijab, which is a religious issue, and the government murdering its own citizens. Okay? Let me ask you this. If she was not Muslim, if she wasn't even Muslim, and this didn't even happen in a Muslim country, would you not still be outraged? You would, because it's wrong for the government to kill its own citizens. Fine. But now people are trying to make this a religious issue, and then on top of that, a political issue, and say that the whole Iranian government has to be removed. Which, of course, as I said before, this benefits a lot of actors, particularly in the West. The thing is, though, with the hijab, even within Islam, you have different opinions about hijab. Okay? Now, you might have one scholar who says, yes, it's required, and you might have another Islamic scholar who says, no, it's not required. They have those guys are experts, and they don't even agree with each other. Okay? So I think a lot of these people who are coming in and commenting about this, they don't have any of the credentials or the authority to talk about this topic. Whether you agree with it, you don't agree with it, it's kind of irrelevant, because if it's true that she was killed by the government, that in and of itself is a crime. Do you understand? So you have to judge that on its own merits without involving things that you don't understand. Now, me personally, again, I don't really see how this is relevant, because in Syria, I can only say from a Syrian point of view, Syria is secular. Syria is not an Islamic republic like Iran. In Syria, you do whatever you want. You have Muslim women who wear the hijab, some of them who don't wear the hijab. it's, you know, there's a separation between, so-called separation between church and state, right? Iran has different laws. Iran is an Islamic republic. They had their revolution in 1979, and this is what they established, right? So you can't come from your point of view, even if it's from just next door, and start using that as the compass for everything else, because then, you know, you're going to start echoing crap that sounds like it came from neoconservatives. I just want to read you this, and I want you to guess who wrote this. Okay? Look at this. I stand in deep solidarity with my precious Iranian brothers and sisters fighting the terror and trauma of the oppressive and repressive Islamic regime in Iran. I have many lovely Iranian relatives who are struggling in this ugly situation. Just take a guess who wrote that, although I think some of you already know. If you gave that to me and you didn't tell me the name, I would be stumped. Who wrote this? Marco Rubio? Did John McCain write this? Well, he can't anymore. But did George Bush write this? Who wrote this? This sounds like it could have come from any neocon. Now in Iran, please, again, if you're there, tell me in the comments right now. I'm hearing that they've cut off Instagram. You know, the internet's been going in and out based on where you are. And there's this website called NetBlocks. Again, take it at face value. Just for what, you know, what they're saying is, for what it's worth, that Iran has banned a lot of these social networks so that people cannot post videos of protests, okay? So they're saying that the mobile networks have been largely shut down, and you have regional disruptions, like I just said. It depends on where you are. And if you go and read this report, they talk about various outlets, Facebook, Instagram, and so on. Now, I'm a bit confused about this. I'll tell you why. Because when you think back to the Arab Spring, you had governments that really, really wanted people not to be able to protest. And I think of Egypt, I think of Tunisia. What did they do? They really blacked out the entire internet. It wasn't selective, like, oh, you can go on Telegram, but you can't go on Facebook. And you can't go on Facebook for 3 hours, but you can go back on 3 hours. So I don't know if this is intentional. I don't know. On the flip side, you're saying people, you're hearing people say that Iran's government has been hacked. So I was also thinking, well, the first instinct is to say Iran's government shut down the internet, but maybe they're also having the internet attacked. I don't know. But I think you should look at some of the sources coming with this stuff. So I'll give you one example. This is a tweet saying that another Iranian woman has been killed, right? She was protesting. Her name is Hadith Najafi, and in the tweet, they're saying that she was killed by 6 bullets, and she was only 20. Now, who posted this? Oh, I know that name. Masih Ali-Najad. You guys remember her. I'm laughing because the last time we talked about her is she claimed, and the U.S. government claimed that the Iranian... I don't know whether it was the guards or whoever, but basically she said before that the Iranian government wanted to kidnap her in New York and then whisk her off in a boat to Venezuela because she posts things that are against Iran on Twitter. I mean, I'm sorry, but that sounds like a whole bunch of horse crap. So when she's posting stuff like this, it is heartbreaking if it's true, but I don't know if it's true. I can't really trust what she's saying. And the problem with exiles abroad, whether they're from Iran, whether they're from Venezuela, they're from Cuba, or they're from Syria, is they all sound like this. And I want to play this clip, which it made me laugh so much. Someone posted this. It says, this is what the average Iranian exile is like.
When you come back on HuffPost again.
Absolutely. And tell Netanyahu that I totally love and support everything he's doing. And if he wants to bomb Iran, I'm totally in support of him. I think that...
You're down for bombing Iran?
I'm down for bombing Iran only because I think that we should have invaded Iran instead of Iraq, because the Iranians would have appreciated it and they would have been liberated, whereas the Iraqis didn't want us there and they don't appreciate it. So sanctions on Iran, bomb the bad people in Iran, and help them, liberate them. They want to be free.
Wow.
We want you to come back on Half Past Seven again.
That was a whole mouthful, right? Have you guys heard they have bad people seeking bombs now? So why was I telling you about the internet in Iran? This is why. Apparently, Elon Musk, he has something called Starlink, right? Basically, the idea is that you can provide internet to people via satellite in areas where they don't have internet. And so now the US government has given him a sanctions exemption. Because remember, Iran, man, the United States cares so much about human rights in Iran that they have sanctions to make people's lives hell in Iran. But they totally care about them just to give them internet, right? Food and medicine is not allowed, but you can have some Starlink internet courtesy of Elon Musk. So this is from Al Jazeera, and they basically gave him, from the Treasury, which runs the sanctions, they gave him a sanctions exemption, okay? So basically, he's being ushered by the U.S. government to provide people in Iran with internet. Now, call me crazy, but given the NSA's history and the CIA's capabilities, you can go take a look at Vault 7, for example. I wouldn't be surprised if that thing is bugged, just to put it very simply and very, very bluntly, right? The thing is, even if you weren't using Starlink, they can get you. If they want to get you, they will get you, right? That's the rule of thumb. Anyway, I just think it's funny that they'll give sanctions exemptions for internet, but not for medicine or anything else really. Here's another tweet. This is from Jake Sullivan. He said, formally announcing this, that the U.S. Treasury and the State Department are helping expand internet and freedom in Iran, and that they're going to hold Iranian officials accountable. So you guys know I was just telling you about sanctions, right? Well, guess what? They've put more sanctions on Iran. So this is from the website of the Treasury, right? And the U.S. Department of the Treasury, OFAC, which is the Office of Foreign Assets Control, is designating Iran's morality police for abuse and violence against Iranian women and the violation of the rights of peaceful Iranian protesters. And then they make mention of Miss Amini, which again is the woman that we were just talking about, whose death sparked these protests. And again, this is just another signal. It's another confirmation that something really tragic and grave may have happened in Iran, but you have a lot of malicious people taking advantage of that to mess with Iran because they don't like Iran's foreign policy, right? Again, I'll take this little moment to remind you why they want to mess with Iran. It's not because of some random selection. Iran supports the Syrian government. Iran supports Hezbollah. Iran supports the Palestinian resistance. Iran supports the Houthis in Yemen. Iran is, they basically just ascended to join the Shanghai, the SCO, Shanghai Cooperation Organization. And with Russia and China being on their side, that by default makes them, guilty by association. So how dare you do trade with China and give them oil in exchange for infrastructure? How dare you continue to support Russia with drones? Do you think it's a coincidence that right when Russia starts using Iranian drones in Ukraine, that the Iranian regime is about to fall, which is how they portray this? Do you think that's a coincidence? I don't know. I really don't know what to tell you. I've seen so much crap. Like, this is my job, man. This is my job. I read about this stuff every day. The Americans are so good at how shall we put it? At sabotage, right? Again, I'm not saying that excuses this potential death or killing of a poor woman if it's true. But all I have, the evidence is right in front of me and right in front of you. We just have a CCTV video and then a bunch of police stations and stuff being burnt down. And then people saying that it's time to remove the Iranian government. I mean, who does that benefit? How does that change anything? Remember, in Syria, their idea of fixing injustices was replacing the Syrian government with even worse people, right? That's what they were going to do. They're always looking for a little crack, they're always looking for a little fissure, they're always looking for a little spark to ignite a so-called revolution. And again, I'm not saying people are not protesting. They definitely are. I myself have shown you these videos. Why would I show them to you if they were not real, if they were not happening right now? But let me give you, let's compare this to another example. You guys remember when they killed George Floyd? With George Floyd, we literally had a full video of the guy being choked to death. Horrific, like really horrific shit. And you could see this guy being killed. You put your knee on someone's neck for 6 minutes, they're going to die. I don't care what they smoked. I don't care what they were doing. They're going to die. It's asphyxiation. So we had the evidence. We had the killing on video. And people went and protested. Those protests were far bigger, right? In every U.S. state, you had protests. Enormous protests. Like innumerable amounts of people. The so-called regime crackdowns, I love this phrase so much, regime crackdowns were far more rampant. I mean, I literally looked at a video with you guys of an NYPD squad car running over protesters. What the fuck? What the hell was that? They just ran them over like terrorists. What was that? That's very unbecoming behavior of an officer, no? Of New York's finest. Very unbecoming of you. So you had a lot more violence against protesters than I'm seeing here, based on everything that's coming out. Did anyone go and say that, the whole U.S. government has to be removed and eviscerated and replaced with a new regime? No one said that. Least of all from other countries. And when people are now pointing the finger at Iran, it's no wonder that the president, when he was at the UN General Assembly in New York, he basically told them, hold on, I'll get you the quote. This one, it was in BBC. He basically said that you guys have no right to talk about injustices or police violence in Iran when the police is so violent in America, it's so violent in the UK. By the way, just the other week, they killed and shot a black man in the UK. Right? Police shootings are not that common, but they do happen. And that was another scandal as well. Right? See, this is from The Guardian. This happened on 12th of September, so not even a few weeks ago. Met Police, the Met is the London Metropolitan Police. Met Police suspend officer involved in fatal shooting of Chris Kaba. Okay? So, a Metropolitan Police officer who fired the shot that killed 24-year-old Chris Kaba has been suspended from frontline duties. And again, that's its own scandal, right? They stopped him in his car and killed him. And I don't see anyone, saying that, you have to get rid of the Liz Truss regime and all this crap. It's so funny that these things, you only hear them when it's convenient to, Western geopolitical goals. Remember, right now, Iran nuclear deal, I'm not hearing anything about that because that's kind of on the back burner again. Nothing's happened. So that means no gas coming in for Europe, no barrels of oil being released. Iran has a huge reserve of oil and Europe needs it right now. The whole world needs it right now, really. And on top of that, we talked about last week with Azerbaijan and Armenia. That's another situation where Israel wants to be in literally in proximity to Iran by working with Azerbaijan. So they have many ways that they can try and crack at Iran. It's not limited to just this. And I'll remind you another thing, because we were talking about Starlink. In 2009, there were also protests in Iran. And what happened back then? People were using Twitter very much as they're using Twitter now. And the State Department intervened and got Twitter not to undergo maintenance because they knew that this will be bad for getting, the government in Iran, to fall, and they wanted the protests to continue. So you once again have a collaboration between state and private companies, big tech, working towards a common objective, which is to overthrow foreign governments. And once again, this New York Times report that came out just 6 days ago, damning, absolutely damning. Every single thing they've been accusing Russia of, and Iran and China, turns out the Pentagon have been doing it as well, and actually for much longer. This program goes back 10 years. 10 years. If the Russians started in 2016, like they claim, well, the Pentagon been doing it before. Obviously, who is surprised? You know, if you go and look back in Iran in 1953, when they took out the prime minister. So when I say they, I mean the CIA and the MI6. The British and the American intelligence, they planted fake stories in the Iranian press, and they injected all sorts of fake news even back then, when there was no social media, there was no, internet. They still managed to employ the same tactics in order to crack and take shots at a foreign government that they didn't like. And what was it about? Of course, resources, because once again, Iran has a lot of oil and a lot of gas. We go back to Miss Amini. I don't know what happened to her. I hope we have more evidence that comes out, because everything is very confusing right now. You have the government saying one thing, her father saying another, the CCTV footage saying something else. So let's hope that there's a clear conclusion and the truth comes out. But I would just beckon you and ask you to open your eyes for Western governments, for Israel, and coming in and trying to use and exploit situations like this to undergo regime change in Iran. Okay, just keep that in mind. That's all I'm saying. And again, when you know the history, it's not far-fetched whatsoever. It's actually the MO. It's the modus operandi. And once again, I know I said this 20 minutes ago, but I'm going to say it again. This thing with the hijab, man, most people, they have no clue what they're getting themselves into. This is, even among Muslims, it's a very touchy subject. It's not just touchy, it's among scholars. They don't agree with each other. Now, is that the law in Iran? Yes, it's the law in Iran. And in Saudi Arabia, by the way, I just wanted to say one thing. Saudi Arabia also has a morality police. I don't hear anyone complaining about them. I don't hear anyone complaining about the Saudi government. I don't hear anyone calling for regime change in Saudi Arabia. Weird, right? I'm sure it has nothing to do with Saudi Arabia being a client state and providing oil and being a partner of the United States for some 60, 70 years, right? I'm sure it has nothing to do with it. And it's something else which is really weird. You have people that kind of like... they'll go and say, you'll have people that pick some random photograph from Iran during the Shah, who, by the way, was a U.S. puppet, very brutal. But they'll find some photograph of some Iranian woman who is, in bikinis or whatever, or in, swimwear. And they'll say, oh, look at Iran, how progressive it was. And like, this is their ideal. Like, for them, they think that a woman being in a bikini is the pinnacle of progressivism and women's rights, because they're so, I don't know what to call it, primal, but that's their definition of progress and being liberated. And so they think that they must go and copy paste that in other countries, and that they think they know the societies in the Middle East better. They think that they can speak for the people there. It's so cringy. People in Iran don't even agree with each other necessarily. People in Syria don't agree with each other necessarily, or wherever. So how are you going to go and act like that's some kind of threshold or bar to strive for? What does that even mean? If you care about human rights in Iran, you would lift sanctions. End of story. Period. That, for me, is the measure of whether you actually care. You would not be, trying to destroy the economy, destroy people's livelihoods, make sure they can't get medicine, they can't get food. That's the true measure whether you respect human rights and you care about human rights. It's not about the hijab. That is an issue that is to be resolved in Iran amongst Iranians, not for people in the West to to distract from the harsh reality of economic warfare. Speaking of Iran, let's move to what happened with Ukraine, right? Because the situation is getting much bigger there. really, really, really touchy stuff. The Ukrainians are extremely mad at Iran, to the point they have stripped Iran's ambassador of his accreditation. Why are they doing this? Because Iran has been sending drones, right? So this past week, you've had a lot of videos popping up from Odessa, for example, of these Iran-made drones being deployed by Russia against Ukrainian positions. So we looked at the Mohajer 6, we looked at the Shahed 136 particularly. That's the one that I wanted to talk to you about. And keep in mind, some reports talk about an Iranian drone. There is a Russian drone, however, the Giran 2, which is a derivative of Iran's Shahed 136. Okay, so it's basically a Russian modification of the Shahed. Now, I really got to be honest with you guys, because I'm confused. A few months ago, people were laughing at Iran. They were saying, oh, Russia has no drones left. Russia has no industry left. Look at them. They're so pathetic. They have to go to Iran to buy those crappy drones from Iran. And now I'm seeing in the New York Times, Ukrainian military officials really worried about these drones. So apparently they're not crappy after all. Apparently they work and they're very deadly. Let me show you this from the New York Times. The headline reads, Russia deploys Iranian attack drones, Ukrainian military says, and it's dated September 18th. A new and Ukrainian officers say frighteningly effective weapon has appeared in the war on the Russian side, Iranian-made attack drones. The powerful weapon is a so-called kamikaze drone carrying a warhead of about 80 pounds. Now, for those of you who used the civilized metric system, 80 pounds is about 36 kilos. So, its appearance in Ukraine is the first time it has been deployed outside the Middle East. The use of the Shahed 136 drones show that while Russia remains mostly isolated internationally, it was even rebuked just like last week by leaders of China and India. I'll get to that in a bit. Moscow has still found support from Iran. It also adds a layer of geopolitical complexity to the conflict as more nations are drawn into providing weaponry. Don't you love the way they write? So, you know, when the United States is sending HIMARS and, Poland is sending all of its Soviet tanks and Germany sending tanks, all these countries in NATO are sending like all the old weaponry they've got into Ukraine. That's defending Ukrainians. And when Iran sends drones to Russia, that's adding geopolitical complexity. I love it, man. In its first use in Ukraine, the Iranian drone blew up an American-supplied M777 howitzer used by the Ukrainian military. This is according to Colonel Kulagin, who is the commander of artillery operations in the Kharkiv counteroffensive. He says that, quote, it blew the 777 in half. Instead of firing 100 artillery shells, it's easier to release one of those drones. Half a dozen strikes destroyed howitzers and armored vehicles, killing 4 soldiers and wounding 16, according to the colonel. I mean, that's devastating, right? That's devastating. I believe there were some pictures in this article down here somewhere. But yeah, absolutely devastating, right? When we talk about a howitzer is basically... Hold on, I don't know if you can see the pictures I'm going to show you now from Twitter. Here's a Russian Giran 2 derivative attacking the headquarters of the Ukrainian Navy in Odessa. Okay, let's take a look at this video. I don't know if it's very clear. I'll show you some other videos. Here's another report.
Опять летит. Опять летит. Туда же.
So I can tell you just from the shape, it looks like a triangle, like an equilateral triangle. They call it a delta wing. That certainly looks like a Shahed 136 or a Giran 2. And we saw in the New York Times report that it carries an 80-pound warhead, so 36 kilos. They're saying also that it can cruise for about 2,000 kilometers. That's insane. That is very, 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 fuel efficient, to put it mildly. I want to show you a video here. Maybe you can get an idea of how they're fired as well, usually. This video was published by Iran, I think. I'm not sure if it was this year or last year, because every year they have the military celebrations, but it gives you an idea of what these Iranian drones look like that are being used in Ukraine. So it's a rack of 6 of them, of 5, excuse me, and obviously they have no wheels because they're not intended to land anymore, right? They're called loitering drones, kamikaze drones. The whole point is that you fire them once and they explode upon impact. Iran is not the first country to use this kind of technology. The ones that invented this are the Germans during World War II. So basically, in World War II, it was called the V1, nicknamed Doodlebug, and you would hear it. You wouldn't know where it's going to land, but if you were close by, you would hear the motor dying because it ran out of fuel. And so they put just enough fuel for it to reach the target. Obviously, this is a lot more sophisticated. It has a guidance system as well to a certain extent, but the idea is the same, that it's one use and that's it. Now, I said we were talking about what it exploded. This is a howitzer 777. Okay, so the Ukrainian military official was saying that one of the drones blew this thing in half. This is an artillery cannon, and I just want to go back to the article. They say that the appearance of the drones, even amid Ukraine's otherwise successful and ongoing counteroffensive in the northeast, prompted Colonel Kulagin to appeal to Ukraine's Western allies to quickly provide defenses or a similar weapon to strike back. He said, "Give us something like this." So the United States is giving Ukraine Switchblade drones, and those were used in an attack on its Black Sea Fleet headquarters. Ukraine has also used the Turkish TB2. Now, you guys remember that they were talking about North Korea as well. I saw an article from Al Jazeera just a few hours ago. The North Koreans are denying that Russia is buying anything from them whatsoever. Because remember, I told you at the time when it was disclosed by the Americans that this could turn out to be a bunch of BS, because the only source for this is the Pentagon. So, take that with a pinch of salt. The North Koreans are saying that we've never given the Russians any weapons, and we are not giving them any weapons now. That's what they say. That's what they say. Going back to the Iranian drones, they're saying that debris from the crashed drone indicated that the Russian military had removed its Iranian markings. The drone was mislabeled on a winglet as a Geran 2 Russian-made drone. So that's why you have these conflicting reports, right? Some are saying it's a Geran 2, some are saying it's a Shahid. I'm assuming the Russians wouldn't like to highly publicize it, but this Ukrainian colonel is saying that these drones are a very serious problem, and without countermeasures, they will destroy all our artillery. I mean, that's pretty scary. Quote, "It was not like artillery that hit us before. I haven't met something like this before." I mean, in the last 2 weeks, you've been hearing about this counteroffensive in Ukraine. They took back regions in Kharkiv. They're also, there's also fighting in Kherson, but the main gains were in Kharkiv, right? I would say that this, in addition to the mobilization, which we'll talk about now in a separate video, these are some of the biggest Russian responses, right? There's a certain amount of arrogance also involved with the Western analysis, because they look at these drones and they laugh at them and they think that they're, they underestimate them, right? You've had people saying, "Oh, look at these parts inside the Iranian drone. It's so ineffective and it's so badly made," and so on. Look, man, in war, the idea is how many objectives can you kick down, right? How many wins can you get against the enemy? If the Ukrainians themselves are saying that they have never seen anything like this before, and it's kicking their artillery breaking it into pieces, shattering it into pieces, I would be very concerned if I were on the Ukrainian joint staff or one of their generals, because these things are designed to be cheaply made. That's the whole point. And remember, cheap in the military it does not mean these things still cost thousands of dollars to produce, if not tens of thousands. I've seen some estimates at around 50,000 per drone. Again, these are just estimates, but the point is that you have a similar kind of arrogance, I would say, in regards to World War II. You know, you have people that look at the German tanks, say, well, the German tanks are very, skillfully engineered, and it's true. Yeah, they have a Tiger tank is an 88 millimeter cannon. It's absolutely enormous, and the engine would break down, which is a great plus, and the parts are difficult to replace too, and the crew takes a longer time to train. Those things, they end up making you lose the war, right? What's the point of having a nicer tank if you can't fix it when it breaks down, or the crew need a longer time to train? You know, or it's more costly to produce. You end up losing the war, and they did. The Russians, they would make T-34s. I'm not saying it's a crappy tank, but people make fun of it compared to a Tiger tank. Well, guess what? The Russians, because they were able to mass produce them in a war of attrition, that can get you a lot. And I don't know how this is going to go now in Ukraine, but having these Iranian drones, hundreds of them, thousands of them, the numbers are undisclosed, but yeah, they're designed to fulfill one job, and they're doing it pretty effectively. And this is why the Ukrainians are very angry. I want to show you this from the Ukrainian government. They're saying that in response to Iran supplying weapons to Russia to use in its war against Ukraine, today we announced the revocation of accreditation of the Iranian ambassador in Kiev and a significant drawdown of diplomatic personnel at the Iranian embassy. So they've all but cut ties, basically, and if I'm in the Ukrainians' shoes, I would obviously do the same. You're arming the guy attacking us. Obviously, we're not going to get on very well. I'm surprised they didn't cut ties completely, actually, honestly. But this is, again, it's all but official, basically. Now the Iranians, this is their response. This is from Al Jazeera. The Iranians said that they will respond appropriately, to Ukraine's revocation of their ambassador's accreditation. And they put out a short statement and said that it was regrettable and based on unconfirmed reports by foreign media. And the spokesperson did not, so this is from the foreign ministry, the spokesperson Kanani did not mention drones or explicitly deny that Tehran has supplied them to Moscow, but said Iran has exercised a, quote, clear policy of active neutrality, unquote, when dealing with the war in Ukraine. I wouldn't say that's accurate 100%. They've given them the drones, man. And I want to show you something else, because this was from July. The Iranians in July, they said that their technical cooperation with Moscow predates the Ukraine war. So they were saying, well, yeah, we're not denying that we're giving them the drones, but if we are giving them the drones, it's because of a previous agreement. It's nothing to do with the Ukraine war. And I would agree to a certain extent. Yes, Iran and Russia have been allies since before the Ukraine war. They cooperate in a multitude of domains. So I'm not surprised, but you can't call that neutral. I wouldn't say that it's absolutely neutral. I mean, obviously Iran is not sending troops there, but they are giving Russia the upper hand when it comes to drone warfare, because the switchblades, they don't cut it. And again, I think this is another. It shows you again how Iran has done something remarkable, because even under sanctions, they've been able to progress so rapidly in vaccine development, nanotechnology, missile and defense technology, cruise missiles. You remember they unveiled a ballistic and a cruise missile. They named them after General Soleimani and Abu Mahdi al-Mohandes, who were assassinated by Trump. Why do you think Donald Trump left the nuclear deal? Because the Israelis are scared of this missile and rocket technology that Iran has. It's very potent and it's very good. The Saudis, you remember a few months ago, they had their Formula One racing. They were so embarrassed because not only were they trying to present themselves as these great hosts of the Grand Prix, but at the same time, drones were blowing up the headquarters or at least the gas fields of Aramco, which is the Saudi oil company, right? And back then, people were saying, oh, these are Houthis firing them, but they're Iranian drones. Okay, well, they work then, right? They're not pieces of crap like you say they are. Obviously, they're very potent. In any case, I think we should wait and see what happens, but from the preliminary reports, and again, this is New York Times and the Ukrainians themselves saying, they're no joke, these Iranian drones. Wouldn't it be great if everyone stopped killing each other and just did some diplomacy? I would love that. Speaking of military equipment, let me show you what Zelensky is saying. Oh man, this has gotta hurt. This has gotta hurt. It's about Israel, okay? We were just talking about how Iran is giving these advanced Shahed 136 and Mohajer 6 drones to Russia, and the Ukrainians themselves are very scared of them, as they wrote in the New York Times. They're very effective, and Ukraine is trying to get something similar, and they've been trying for a long time now. Drones aside, they've been trying for a long time to get Israel to sell them weapons. Well, Israel is selling weapons, but not to Ukraine. And they're going to give some to the UAE, to the United Arab Emirates. So this is reported in the Times of Israel. Israel has agreed to sell an advanced air system to the UAE, and it's from two unidentified sources within Reuters, who spoke to Reuters. And we're talking specifically about Spider, okay? So these are manufactured by Rafael Advanced Defense Systems, and they can defend against various types of aircraft, including drones and cruise missiles. Now remember, Zelensky was not asking for this specifically. He was asking for Iron Dome, which didn't really make sense because Iron Dome was made for, short-range rockets, and that's not what the Russians were firing. So that was already something confusing. But regardless, the Israelis just said no weapons. No, we're not giving you anything. Only humanitarian aid, only a few refugees coming in, and who can stay as long as they're Jewish, of course, everyone else. So another source told Reuters that Abu Dhabi had bought Israeli systems that can counter drone attacks that are a threat to the UAE. They don't say when the systems will be delivered to the Gulf nation, but of course they make mention of the Yemen's Iran-backed Houthi rebels who launched several missile and drone attacks against the UAE. And we talked about this at the beginning of the year. Remember, they not only attacked Saudi Arabia, but also in the UAE, and the UAE has been a supporter of this genocide, this horrific war against Yemen, which is still ongoing. And this is one of the only times where the Yemenis have been able to strike not only inside the UAE, but so deep, right? It's the first time that they really felt the war has been brought to their doorstep, because the Saudis is one thing, but the UAE is not that close. We're talking quite a ways off, and they did it using drone technology, which was attributed to Iran, which we were just talking about. Right, so it's unsurprising that now they're trying to get this Spider system from the Israelis. Now Zelensky, of course, is very upset. Like I told you, he's begging for weapons, and then they not only refuse to sell him anything, but then go and sell it to the UAE. So this is 23rd of September, also Times of Israel, and Zelensky complained in an interview that Israel had given his country nothing to help it defend itself, indicating that its leaders had been disingenuous in rejecting his requests for air defense systems. Now, this was in an interview with TV5 Monde, which is a French channel, and I had it up somewhere for you. But the translation here will suffice. So Zelensky goes on to say that they gave us nothing, zero, and I understand they are in a difficult situation with Syria, with Russia. Of course, what difficult situation is, I don't see how Israel is experiencing anything difficult. They seem to be occupying Syria just fine and bombing it every week just fine. I wouldn't call that exactly a difficulty. And Russia seems to be turning a blind eye just fine. So, they actually say in the article, they say Russia has largely turned a blind eye to the Israeli strikes. Exactly. although ties between Jerusalem and Moscow have suffered as Israel has condemned its invasion of its neighbor. Yes, here was the interview in French. I was looking for it. I knew I had it somewhere. It's actually just below. Let's take a listen.
Israël n'a rien fourni, rien, zéro. Je comprends que leur situation est difficile avec la Syrie et la Russie, mais j'appelais les deux dirigeants, les deux premiers ministres d'Israël, et je demandais de nous fournir les moyens de défense antiaérienne.
So I'm going to translate from Ukrainian to French to English. He's saying that the same thing. Israel gave us nothing. They gave us zero. And I understand they're in a difficult situation, a difficult spot with Syria and so on. But I called both of the Israeli prime ministers because you remember there's Naftali Bennett and then we have Yair Lapid now, who's the caretaker prime minister. So he's talking about Lapid and Bennett. I called both of them and they gave us absolutely nothing.
Je comprends qu'ils doivent défendre leur terre.
I understand that they must defend their territory. Yes, Damascus is apparently in Israel now.
Après, j'ai reçu des informations de nos services de renseignement qu'en fait.
But then I got information from our security services.
Qu'en fait, l'Israël approvisionne ses moyens de défense dans d'autres pays.
Yeah, so he told me, my intelligence officials told me that Israel is actually selling its weapons to other countries, and of course we have the report about the UAE. That's who he's talking about, referring to.
Ils peuvent les vendre, ils peuvent les exporter.
Israel is able to sell these weapons. They are able to export them.
C'est pourquoi je suis étonné.
That's why I'm shocked.
Comment c'est possible? Vous savez qu'il y a la guerre en Ukraine.
Comment c'est possible? How is this possible? You know there's a war in Ukraine.
Et vous savez qu'en Ukraine, il y a beaucoup de gens d'origine juive.
And Zelensky saying, you guys in Israel, you know that there are a lot of Jewish people in Ukraine.
Et vice versa, il y a beaucoup
and vice versa.
d'Ukrainiens en Israël.
There are a lot of Ukrainians in Israel.
C'est possible d'avoir cette attitude.
How is it possible to have this position? He's right. He's actually right. You have a lot of Ukrainian Jews. You have a lot of Israelis who are originally Ukrainian. Many of their prime ministers actually have been are mostly from Eastern Europe. He's right. He's right. I don't understand it either. That doesn't mean I like anything Israel is doing, but from his point of view, it definitely makes no sense. I think the reason is that if the Israelis start giving these weapons to the Ukrainians, the Russians will suddenly open their eyes about these airstrikes in Syria and start screwing them that way. Remember, Russia has even more advanced surface-to-air missiles and air defense capabilities, whether we're talking about Christ, the name escapes me right now. What the hell was it called? Damn it. I was telling you, the S-300. Yes, exactly. They have S-300 and S-400. So Russia has really, really some of the best air defense capabilities. And if, the Israelis start giving weapons to one side, I could imagine the Russians getting very angry. There was a report actually a few months ago that an S-300, not fired, but I think locked on to one of the Israeli jets, which is kind of like giving them a signal, like back off, which is never happened before, right? Usually what the Israelis will do, they just go in, they'll bomb Syria and go back, and the Russians say nothing. Remember, Zelensky just said you have a lot of Ukrainian Jews and Israeli Ukrainians, vice versa. It's true of Russia as well. You have a lot of Israelis who are originally Russians. You have a lot of Jews in Russia and so on. So I think it's just interesting that they're selling it to the UAE instead. The reason they're doing that is obviously because this lets Israel portray itself as some, prestigious arms exporter and manufacturer of weapons. Yes, I don't know why selling equipment that murders people or things like that should be viewed as something of prestige, but it is. Because right now, who are the top arms exporters? Russia, the French, they build weapons as well, the British, the Americans, so on. So the Israelis want to kind of, nudge their way into that field and portray themselves as having some of the best equipment, just like they boast about Iron Dome all the time and so on. This is part of that scheme. At the same time, it's also about making sure that their technology is in the UAE. Remember, when Donald Trump, he did this Abraham Accords, he got Bahrain and the UAE to establish ties with Israel, which is unprecedented because most Arab countries do not have ties with Israel because Israel is occupying Palestine, right? So, and as long as it's there, they're never going to have ties with it. Of course, the Israeli lobby, they pushed Trump to get this done. And under the table, Israel and the UAE, Israel and Saudi Arabia, these countries, they've had ties for a long time, albeit hidden. And so he really just got this to come out in the open. And I think it'll just be a question of time before Saudi Arabia normalizes ties with Israel. They were allowing Israeli flights to go through their airspace not long ago. You remember that? So basically, for the Israelis, it's low risk because this has nothing to do with Ukraine. They make money. They get to establish themselves as arms exporters. And also on top of it, their equipment is in Arab countries, right? And I'll just tell you what I thought of right now. In the Falklands War, I remember that the French had given some of their codes to the Argentines, which caused a lot of British casualties. So when you have another country using your weapons, it goes both ways, right? Just as an example, with Pegasus, I would not be surprised if Israel is also able to see what the law enforcement officials are doing with Pegasus against targeted persons, right? So they're using Israeli software. Well, guess what? I'm pretty sure Israel can see what they're doing and can operate their equipment as well. That's just my hunch, okay? That's just my hunch. And there's precedence for that, like I told you in the Falklands, for example. So just a little thing I wanted to tell you about. And I would say right now, given the lack of support from the Israelis and Russia having the Iranian drones, it's not looking good on that front, but we'll see. So we'll get back to that in a second, but I still haven't touched on the main topics, right? The referendum, the mobilization. These are also huge topics. So let's start with the mobilization. Okay, give me a second. I need to drink something, man. You guys have me going on overdrive right now. You need to give me a break. Actually, we have Jody who joined on Patreon, so thank you very much for the support. And if you guys like my work, you'd like to support independent journalism, please consider donating €1 or $1 a month on Patreon. The link is below. And as per our tradition, I will just play a short crab dance for Jody. Everybody, say thanks to her, and let's go.
Clap for that, you stupid bastard.
Corn Pop was a bad dude, and he ran a bunch of bad boys.
Listen, fuckhead, you have fucking crossed the line, claiming I'm the enemy. You got that, you goddamn son of a bitch?
I don't give a fuck what you think, bitch.
Good morning. Sunday morning.
Cut that bitch out.
Thank you for Iron Dome, which is a technical marvel.
والله انت كلاب بصراحة يعني. ماشي نشتغل عادي.
We lied, we cheated, we stole.
China.
And you ain't black.
There's always the macro, and then there's the micro.
Do not come. Do not come.
I'm gonna come.
You talking to me?
Ladies and gentlemen,
I'll have 2 number 9s. Number 9 large.
we got him.
I myself, I know it's not.
I've fallen and I can't get up.
Oh!
Disgusting!
Why you texting? Why? You're getting nervous, man. Calm down. It's okay. Okay.
Suck my dick and
fucking shogunate. I yield my time. Fuck you.
Again, thank you very much, Jody. And I just wanted to make a small correction because I wanted to look up this thing about the Falklands. Basically, you know, what the French did is they built these fail-safe mechanisms into the missiles, which they had sold to Argentina before the war. I think it's about 5 missiles. And they wouldn't tell the British about the kill switch or how to stop them, right? I think you know, they did Britain a favor by blocking further sales of French weapons to the junta, but you know, they declared an arms embargo at the start of the war. But at the same time, they wouldn't give them the keys to the safe, as they were called, right? But that's a whole other chapter. We'll get into another time. Let's talk about the mobilization. And I see, by the way, we've got 2,000 people watching. Please make sure you've hit the like button. It helps the channel grow, and it not only helps the channel grow, but fight the algorithm, right? We're always in a fight. Okay. Shirley Temples. My grandmother used to make these. I love them. It's grenadine syrup with Sprite, or whatever other equivalent you can get. Very good. And non-alcoholic. Okay, so partial mobilization in Russia. So President Putin has announced a mobilization of up to 300,000 troops. There are whispers that actually the number is much higher because there's a section in the order which is classified, blotched out. I'll play you the video, though, of him announcing the mobilization, and then we'll get into it, because this is a very, very serious topic with huge ramifications for a lot of young men, both in Ukraine and Russia.
Уважаемые друзья, сегодня наши вооруженные силы, как уже говорил, действуют на линии боевого соприкосновения, которая превышает 1000 километров. Противостоят не только неонацистским формированиям, а фактически всей военной машине коллективного Запада. В этой ситуации считаю необходимым принять следующее решение. Оно в полной мере адекватно угрозам, с которыми мы сталкиваемся. А именно, для защиты нашей Родины, ее суверенитета и территориальной целостности, для обеспечения безопасности нашего народа и людей на освобожденных территориях, считаю необходимым поддержать предложение Министерства обороны и Генерального штаба о проведении в Российской Федерации частичной мобилизации. Повторю, речь идет именно о частичной мобилизации. То есть призыву на военную службу будут подлежать только граждане, которые в настоящий момент состоят в запасе. И прежде всего те, кто проходил службу в рядах вооруженных сил, имеет определенные военно-учетные специальности и соответствующий опыт. Призванные на военную службу перед отправкой в части в обязательном порядке будут проходить дополнительную военную подготовку с учетом опыта специальной военной операции. Указ о частичной мобилизации подписан. В соответствии с законодательством.
Okay, so as he said, this is most notably of concern for people who've already served in the Russian army, who have experience, who are specialized. At the same time, however, I've seen many reports of students being called up to serve, being given draft notices, of people who had medical exemptions before, but now apparently those don't count because they've been drafted. And a lot of people are upset about this. A lot of people have gone out and started protesting. Here, I'll just show you a couple of videos. Okay, this is from Moscow. Here's another one. This is from St. Petersburg, I believe. Yeah, so this girl, she's in a wheelchair, and I my understanding of what's written on the sign, there's a higher quality video of this, but she basically said, don't end up like me. So she's basically saying, don't go, don't fight, you might lose a leg, you'll end up in a wheelchair like me. That's her message, basically. And also, when you see people in those yellow vests, right, in Russia, those are usually for the press. So it's usually, reporters, cameramen, photojournalists, etc. So the numbers vary. I've seen it between 1,000 and 2,000 people that have been arrested for protesting against the draft. And again, the number varies from source to source, but that's a rough guess. A rough estimate, rather, not a guess. Yeah, you can see here similar scenes to the start of the war when people were protesting against the war. It's understandable, right? It's understandable. I don't think anyone wants to go to war. But let me show you some more of these videos. These are the men that are being shipped off and saying goodbyes. So various videos of people that have been drafted just before they get on the buses, saying goodbye to their families and so on. There's one where they were drinking as well, which is unsurprising.
Отец, мне давай. Оператору.
Well, you get the idea, right? In Russian, device, come on, let's go, you know? So anyway, about this draft, well, a lot of men are fleeing the country. If you want to go book a ticket from Russia, to Turkey, for example, I've seen reports that it's in the thousands of euros because everyone wants one. The prices have shot right up. So that's already a financial issue. The other issue is that if you get a draft notice and you don't show up, you can go to prison. I think Putin updated the decree. It's like 10 years now, imprisonment if you don't show up. Basically, it's like being a deserter. That's the how they consider it. And a lot of men are in queues going into Georgia. Like Georgia, if you're Russian, you don't need a visa to go into Georgia. So you have extremely long queues of buses, cars, even people on bicycles trying to get across into countries like Georgia, Kazakhstan, into Finland, whether they need a visa or they don't, just trying to flee. And it's a very tough situation. I personally know someone who was in the Russian army a long time ago, and when I saw this order, I immediately thought, shit, he's probably going to have to go serve because Putin said they're specifically looking for people with former experience. I looked him up, and he told me about 5 of his friends have already been drafted, and he's bolted out of Russia because he is against the war and he does not want to serve and doesn't want to be there. So, that's I get it. I get it, man. Like, no one wants to be sent to the war. I've seen some really crude remarks also, like people saying the Russians deserve it because when the war started they didn't protest. They're only protesting now because it concerns them and they might have to go fight the war. But that's a really stupid way to look at things. I mean, people could, if you accept the notion that Putin's a dictator and going out and protesting will land you in jail, then obviously you're going to have people that are afraid to protest. Does that mean that they're in support of the war? Like, I don't understand this mentality. They blame Russians for everything, while saying that they also don't have a choice. Anyway, this mobilization is obviously a response to the counteroffensive in Kharkiv, right? You guys remember, I'll pull up the map. The Russians lost a significant chunk of territory, and I talked about this in detail with Scott Ritter. And again, there are various reasons for that. here. These are the gains that they made. I mean, you can just see in a matter of 4 days what happened from 6th of September to 10th of September. This whole area in purple was regained by Ukraine in a matter of days. And when we talked about this with Scott, the notion was that the Ukrainians had mounted such a convincing, counteroffensive in Kherson that the Russians ended up sending all the troops there. And that's kind of how they lost it. Now, I've seen, again, I don't know if these are accurate, but you have people saying that a bunch of the units that are turning up are completely ineffective. I think that's more propaganda than truth. I'm not saying it's completely false, because when you mobilize 300,000 people, obviously not every single one of them is going to be fit for duty. But I think it's more like discouraging the Russians and so on. But I want to go back to the speech where Putin said that they're doing this to protect the homeland, sovereignty, and territorial integrity, and that they're facing the collective West. I agree. Here's the quote. He says, "In fact, the entire military machine of the collective West." He's right. That is what is happening. When you pump 50 billion is a goddamn understatement, man. When you pump all of these weapons from Germany, from the UK, from Poland, from the Americans, not to mention the Lend-Lease, which is its own beast. You have all this military might of NATO, crammed into Ukraine. Ukraine probably has more NATO weapons than actual NATO members. Ukraine is honestly more of a NATO member than actual NATO members, right? I would definitely agree that they're facing the entire military machine of the West. Absolutely, there's no question about it. On top of that, it's not just the military machine, it's economic warfare as well, right? They're trying to put a G7 price cap on Russian oil sales, gas as well. They're trying to slash revenue to Russia. They've sanctioned Russia more than any other country. So it's not just military, it's economic as well. Like I always tell you, these things go hand in hand. So he's definitely right there. Whether you agree, you don't agree with what Russia's doing is not the point here. The point is that you have a situation where, yes, Russia is facing the full brunt of the Western military machine. And so the reason he's declaring a partial mobilization, in my opinion, and the opinion of a lot of people, is that he doesn't want to upset and cause the support that he has from Russians right now, which is unwavering, to slip from his grasp. Because right now, 300,000, the Russians might accept this, right? In the end. But if you say everybody is to go to war, it's a full mobilization instead of a partial one, I think he would lose a good chunk of popular support. You understand what I'm saying? And you have to keep in mind, even right now, when it's partial mobilization, this is the biggest war effort that Russia has undergone since World War II. So, when they say it's existential for them, I think that's an accurate assessment. The West, they are adamant in destroying Russia. That's clear. You don't send HIMARS systems. You don't send $50+ billion worth of weapons and give a lend-lease to a country unless you're in a world war at this point. So it's definitely existential. It's definitely existential. I would just remind you, though, that despite the protests, which you've seen a lot in St. Petersburg, you've seen a lot in Moscow, he still has popular support in Russia, which, in his position right now, waging a war, using the best men that you have, using Russia's young men, you can't afford to lose that. You can't afford to lose the popular support at home. Once that's gone, it's game over. That is the biggest blow that could possibly be dealt, more than anything on the battlefield. All right, no question about it. Now, people are saying that the true number is 1 million, that it's not 300,000, it's up to 1 million men. I don't know. I think it's irrelevant at this point. Whether it's 300,000 or 999,000, the point still stands. This is the biggest war effort that Russia has undergone since World War II. It is very painful for a lot of families, and it's completely normal that you have men trying to flee because they know that it's not just about being put into service; it's being sent to the front line. You'll have other people. You have people on the other side to say, "Well, those people are cowards and they're deserters and so on." Look, man, I'm not condoning or agreeing with either one, but I'm just reporting to you what the reality is. You have people fleeing, they're worried, they're scared, and they've been, they don't see any other choice. What I'm trying to understand is why you have people with exemptions like students, people that don't have any former experience, people that are medically unable to join the army. Why are they being sent in if those reports are true? That's what I'm trying to understand, because the Ukrainians will say, yeah, well, the Russians are just trying to put them in the meat grinder. They're just cannon fodder. No, when you need a full mobilization like this, a partial mobilization of 300,000, you can't afford to just send whoever you want into the bloody army. That's not going to help you. You must have people with experience, preferably. And remember, he also talks about the reservists being called up, which is, those are people who... they call them weekend soldiers, which is kind of a derogative term. But people that are still in the army but not stationed or on active duty and can be called up at any time. So I think this is something we'll have to see what happens. I'll show you, though, very quickly what CNN had to say about this and their take on this. So this is a retired colonel,
with us now is Colonel
from the U.S. Armed Forces, and let's take a look at what he had to say.
Cedric Layton, CNN military analyst and former member of the Joint Staff at the Pentagon. Cedric, 300,000 new troops, albeit these are reservists. These are people who are already inside Russia. What and where would they make a difference on the battlefield in Ukraine?
So, John, good morning. It really depends on the kinds of troops that they're going to bring into this battle space of Ukraine here. So where they could make a difference would potentially be in these areas right here. What they might do is they might be used to secure these particular areas. Now, this, of course, is where Ukraine has made significant gains, so they'd have a bit of a difficult time in this area. But what the Russians can do is once you go into these areas that they control, in essence, the land bridge from this part of Russia all the way to Crimea, which is right down here, those are the areas where they could make a difference if they are the right specialties. So that would include infantry troops, tank troops, armored personnel drivers, and also infantry folks. So these are the kinds of things that and kinds of capabilities that they'd be looking at, and they would primarily be used here unless Putin wants to do something through Belarus or through this part of Russia. We don't see any movement like that, but those are, of course, possibilities for Russia's movement.
Cedric, one of the other things that we've heard is that Putin may be extending the troops who are already on service. What would that do to morale? If you're a Russian soldier serving in Ukraine already, in retreat and already there longer than you thought you would be, what would that do to morale if you're told all of a sudden you can't go home?
Oh, that destroys morale, John. That's one of the worst things. So, let's take a look, for example, at what would happen in the east. So the Russians are trying to move into this area right here, the town of Bakhmut. And what they would be doing is trying to advance these forces. So you're trying to advance forces who are tired, who have been in this fight for months now, for 7 months or more. And remember, they were standing there even in December. So you're talking about a bunch of troops that are going to be incredibly tired when it comes to doing this kind of thing. And they're trying to respond to the Ukrainian offensives that are happening here and also in the south. The Ukrainians are trying to go here. The Russians will have to stop them if they have any hope of trying to do anything here. And it's going to be a really tough thing for them to do. And I think it's very difficult for the Russians to get to that point.
And those reservists alone, too, there are some real questions about their readiness.
Exactly, Erica. That's one of the key things. So when you're planning something like this, you want to make sure that you have people who have just left the military, people who have come into specialties that they could potentially use, everything from IT specialists to logistics specialists, which of course they would need a lot of. My feeling is that they're going to have a really tough time filling those ranks and doing it as quickly as they need to.
And one of the things you're hearing from NATO officials is they see this as a sign of weakness, an admission of weakness from Russia, that they have to do this. So, Cedric, there's also this nuclear threat, very direct nuclear threat, where Putin is saying, you know, if you violate Russia's territorial integrity, then there very well may be a nuclear response, not bluffing. How serious do you take that, especially in conjunction now?
Right, well, I'm going to get to that section afterwards, but I just wanted to show you briefly what this retired colonel says. In any case, really huge developments. The Iranian drones, the mobilization. We'll see what happens. We'll see what happens. But to me, this looks very bad because this means the war is not ending. We're in September now. This has been going on since February. You know, at the end of the day, someone is going to have to sit down and come up with a diplomatic solution. This can't go on forever. I haven't even gotten into the economic dimension of it yet. I mean, I've done a million videos on it, but you know, the cost that this is, the strain that it's putting on Europe, and the cost being leveled on Europe's economy is really unprecedented. So we'll see what happens now that the Russians are going to bring in 300,000 plus troops and the drones, but the best thing would be a diplomatic solution. Let's hope for that. Here, let me show you something from Russia and Ukraine, which is the referendum. This is the other big topic, right? So they're holding these referendums now in eastern Ukraine, particularly in hold on, where's the map? You guys know I love a good map. I'm not satisfied until I find the right one. This is okay. This is acceptable. It's BBC. all right. So the referendums in Ukraine. Now, basically, the in a nutshell, people in eastern Ukraine are being asked whether they want to join Russia. They want to become part of the Russian Federation. We're talking about specifically 4 provinces. So we're talking about Luhansk, Donetsk, Zaporizhia, and Kherson. Now, keep in mind, in the Donbass, we have the People's Republics, right? The LPR and DPR that are being asked whether they want to join the Russian Federation. That's how the question is being worded. For Zaporizhia and Kherson, it's worded differently. They're asking them, would you like to become independent republics and subsequently join the Russian Federation? The result is the same. I just wanted to tell you about this nuance in the language. But the result is the same. Now, the response in the West is that this is a sham, right? I love this. Every time there's anything that involves voting in Syria or in Iran or in Venezuela or Russia, or it's always a sham, and it's always undemocratic, and it's always illegal before it's even taken place. It's a foregone conclusion. Why bother even checking? Why bother even doing anything, right? Who needs to know? Why should I do this segment? I can just turn it off right now, right? I'll just leave because it's just illegal. It's a foregone conclusion. I shouldn't even bother, right? So let me explain to you why these regions are being asked to join. The answer is very simple. Let's look at the map here of the ethnic Russian population in Ukraine. Crimea, this is a census from 2001, which is still used as a guide, right? The majority of people living in Crimea are ethnic Russians, okay? Now, when it comes to the 4 regions we just talked about in eastern Ukraine, it's not a majority, but it's a lot. I mean, look at, for example, 39%, 38% is huge. It's absolutely huge. They show you here the contrast here. In Sevastopol, so this is the capital of Crimea, 71% of the population are Russian. In Kiev, by contrast, only 13%. But I think this should explain to you some of the logic behind these referendums, right? The idea is that these people feel neglected by their governments. They feel that the Ukrainian government has been bombing them and killing them for the last 8 years because they're ethnic Russian, and they feel closer to Russia than they do to Ukraine, and that's why they want to join the Russian Federation. That is the logic behind these referendums. Okay? So, what is the Western press saying about this? Well, they definitely won't tell you what I just told you, but which is just a bunch of basic facts, but this is the narrative in the West. They're saying that with Kalashnikov rifles, Russia is driving the staged vote in Ukraine. Aha. Okay, so I've seen a couple of videos, basically, where they have someone coming up, like you'll have, it was 2 women carrying a ballot box, and they're going door to door, and you have 2 Russians, or people who appear to be Russian soldiers, accompanying them. And so this is the proof, basically, that, you know, Russia is forcing people at gunpoint to vote in favor of Russia. Now, it's very confusing to me, because when I was reading one of these articles, they were interviewing someone who was asked to vote, and they voted no to joining the Russian Federation. And then this person was asked, well, what happened to you? He said, nothing. I was really confused. I was really confused about that. So it's conflicting, because on the one side they tell you that the vote is illegal even though people are coming out, and then on the other side they tell you actually the people are being forced to vote at gunpoint, which is kind of what you hear in Syria, right? They say that people are watched by the security services at the voting booth, at the polls, and someone looks over their shoulders and tells them how to vote. I mean, it's almost like a caricature, you know? On the other hand, let me explain something. I understand the argument that most people, they say most people, again, I don't know how they collected this number, but they say a lot of people have fled these regions because of the war. Yes, that's likely. It's very likely, as a matter of fact. So the question is, how do you conduct a truly democratic poll and referendum, and you get people to go to the polls if they're not there, if they've fled? Remember, you have like 7 million Ukrainians that are outside of Ukraine. You have a whole chunk more that are displaced inside Ukraine internally. And so their argument is that you can't gauge properly whether these regions actually want to join Ukraine because they're occupied by Russian forces and people have left them because of the war. And then if you look at ABC News, they're saying that the governor of Luhansk, accused officials of taking down the names of people who voted against joining Russia. So this guy in online posts, he's alleging that Russian officials threatened to kick down the doors of anyone who didn't want to vote.
Thousands of Russian men now on notice heading into the winter months. So what is your assessment of Putin's latest move to call up more reservists? We're nearly 7 months into this fight now, and he has been pushed back consistently by the Ukrainians. What do you make?
How dare you, Phil Lipoff speaking over me. Okay, I was just trying to show you this part here. As I was saying before Phil interrupted me, Luhansk governor Serhiy Haidai was accusing Russian officials of taking down the names of people who voted against joining Russia. What he means by taking down is that he said they were writing them in a list, That's what he's saying. And he was posting online that Russian officials were threatening to kick down doors of people who didn't vote. Other things that I've seen is that they're taking 1 vote per household. So instead of, if you have 4 people in a household, instead of having 4 of them vote if they're above 18, they would just take 1 vote per household. These are the claims that I'm seeing. I mean, I don't know if they're true. That's the problem, because it's so full of propaganda. It's so full of lies when they talk about elections in Iran, in Syria, which I know and I've reported about, that when I look at this, I'm also wondering, is this also bullshit? Probably is. It's the same people saying the same stuff as usual. So I can't gauge whether what they're saying is true. You can't deny, however, that a good chunk of people there, they feel neglected by the Ukrainian government. They feel discriminated against. And yeah, they would probably vote in favor of it. Now, is it fair to have the vote when a lot of them are missing? For me, what really sticks out to me, I'm not going to say whether, this is the right time to do the vote, or whether these claims from ABC News and all these other outlets are true. What I will tell you, however, with utmost certainty, what I can tell you with 100% confidence is that all these people denouncing the referendums in Ukraine are hypocrites of the highest order. They are the pinnacle of hypocrisy. History has known no one as hypocritical. And how do I know this? Let me show you Secretary of State Antony Blinken talking about what's happening in Ukraine, and then I'm going to show you another video of Blinken. Okay, here's what he had to say.
For the UN Charter, for the General Assembly, and for this Council. The very international order that we have gathered here to uphold is being shredded before our eyes. We cannot, we will not allow President Putin to get away with it. Defending Ukraine's sovereignty and territorial integrity is about much more than standing up for one nation's right to choose its own path, fundamental as that right is. It's also about protecting an international order where no nation can redraw the borders of another by force. If we fail to
listen to what he says next.
Defend this principle, when the Kremlin is so flagrantly violating it, we send a message to aggressors everywhere that they can ignore it too.
Yes, you do. For once, I agree with you, Mr. Blinken. This is Blinken when he just got the job as Secretary of State. And he was asked about the Golan Heights, which Israel illegally annexed from Syria, which is what they're saying Russia's doing. They're saying Russia is illegally annexing the Donbass and these 4 regions, right? Israel illegally annexed the Golan Heights, and here's what Blinken had to say.
Time.
The Trump administration, as you know, also recognized Israeli sovereignty over the Golan Heights, which Israel captured from Syria back in 1967. Will your administration, the Biden administration, continue to see the Golan Heights as part of Israel?
Look, leaving aside the legalities of that question, as a practical matter.
Look, man. Stop bothering me with these legalities and international law. I don't care about that. The practicality of it, well, there you have your answer. There you have his answer. Mr. Blinken does not care about legalities, obviously, when it comes to annexing territory. So I'm really confused why he shows up at the UN this week and says that Russia is violating international law and we have to protect international law. You said you don't care about it. You said leaving the legalities aside. What could be clearer than that? These are the Golan Heights. This is what we're talking about, right? This whole area in yellow has been occupied by Israel since 1967. They illegally annexed it in the 1980s. And the Trump administration said, you know what? We are going to break with the rest of the planet, including previous U.S. administrations. And we're going to say that this is not Syria. This is actually Israel. We recognize this as Israel. And the Biden administration comes in and he's asked this question. Blinken has asked this question. Are you going to change back to what the whole world says, that this is Syria? He says, no, because we want to get rid of Assad. I'll play you the rest of the clip. Listen.
The legalities of that question, as a practical matter, the Golan is very important to Israel's security. As long as Assad is in power in Syria, as long as Iran is present in Syria, militia groups backed by Iran.
Look, man, the Donbass is really important to Russia's security. As long as NATO and other paramilitaries are present in Ukraine, it's got to stay Russian. That's how it is. See, I can also play this game, right? We can also play this game like Mr. Blinken. And he is right, because he said that if we do this, if we allow this to happen, then other people are going to start copying it. right? You allow one aggressor to redraw borders, then you're basically sending a message to other aggressors to do the same. And that is what you have done. That is what America has done 100 times over. And that is why Russia is doing what it's doing today. America has invaded other countries, redrawn their borders 1,000,000 times, and that's why you have signaled to Russia that it is okay to do this. That's why no one respects you. That's why no one listens to what you're saying. That's why no one in the Kremlin gives a shit. Because when Washington does it, they get away with it. So who's to say the Kremlin can't get away with it? It's not even a question of Washington versus the Kremlin. Literally the same person. That's him. That's Blinken himself saying that it doesn't matter when Israel annexes other people's territory. And now he suddenly cares about Russia annexing other territory? What a load of drivel. What a load of dribble. Was that not the same man? 1 year apart? The hypocrisy is staggering. I want to play you a clip by George Galloway. I think he has some more hypocrisy to tell you about from the Americans.
With absolutely no understanding of the word irony, Washington said today that it would not recognize the results of these referendums, because to do so would be an offense against the national sovereignty of Ukraine. That you cannot have one part of a country decide to leave the state it's in and join another state or become an independent state. Did you hear them laughing in Belgrade about that? Did you hear the people of Serbia say, wait, what? Because we sliced a part of Serbia through a bogus referendum and immediately recognized something called Kosovo as an independent state. And Russia warned at the time that you are making a legal precedent that you might come later to regret. But of course they don't regret it, because most of them have forgotten that they did it.
What's good for the goose is good for the gander. What's good for the goose is good for the gander. America has played this game 1,000,000 times over, right? It's not just America, by the way. You can go back 100 years. You can look at the French and the British and say, you know what? I'll take this piece of Syria. You can have this piece. I'll take that piece. Maybe we can share this one. And now they're so offended by redrawing borders. Have you guys seen a map of Africa? Have you seen a map of the Middle East? They've literally like taken a ruler and drawn borders on a map. Like, just say please. What am I supposed to say, man? What am I supposed to say with these hypocrites? They come here and want to give lectures and you know, as soon as they get off the microphone, they're going and doing the same thing. Oh, man. You know what? There's one last thing I wanted to tell you regarding this this nuclear threat from Putin, right? Basically, where he said that if you hold on, I'm trying to find the section in Russian. I want the one with subtitles in English so you can hear. I don't like it when it doesn't have subtitles. Give me a second. Yeah. Right, there we go. This is the clip. So a few days ago, September 21st, Putin, he gives this speech, and he basically tells the West that if you don't back off and you threaten Russian territorial integrity, we have the nuclear option. Let me play the clip and then we'll analyze it.
Все, чтобы обеспечить безопасные условия для проведения референдумов. Для того, чтобы люди могли выразить свою волю. И то решение о своем будущем, которое примет большинство жителей Донецкой и Луганской народных республик, Запорожской и Херсонской областей, мы поддержим. В своей агрессивной антироссийской политике Запад перешел всякую грань. Мы постоянно слышим угрозы в адрес нашей страны, нашего народа. Некоторые безответственные политики на Западе не только говорят о планах по организации поставок в Украине дальнобойных наступательных вооружений, систем, которые позволят наносить удары по Крыму, другим регионам России. Такие Террористические удары, в том числе с использованием западного оружия, уже наносятся по приграничным населенным пунктам Белгородской и Курской областей. В ход пошел и ядерный шантаж. Речь идет не только о поощряемых Западом обстрелах Запорожской атомной электростанции, что грозит атомной катастрофой, но и о высказываниях некоторых высокопоставленных представителей ведущих государств НАТО о возможности и допустимости применения против России оружия массового поражения, ядерного оружия. Тем, кто позволяет себе такие заявления в отношении России, хочу напомнить, что наша страна также располагает различными средствами поражения, а по отдельным компонентам и более современными, чем у стран НАТО. И при угрозе территориальной целостности нашей страны для защиты России и нашего народа мы, безусловно, используем все имеющиеся в нашем распоряжении средства. Это не блеф. А те, кто пытаются шантажировать нас ядерным оружием, должны знать, что...
Today I learned that blackmail is chantage in Russian, just like in French. Anyway, Putin is referring to the long-standing Russian policy, which is public, of when they would use nuclear weapons, right? One of them, for example, is if the leadership of the Russian government is targeted. Another is Russian, the very existence of Russia, and so, of course, the territory. And you have people saying, well, the reason he's trying to annex and do these referendums of eastern Ukraine is so that these become Russian territory, and then he can say, well, because you are mounting attacks inside Donetsk, for example, you have threatened Russia's territorial integrity, and therefore we are going to nuke you. I mean, it's a good theory. It's a good theory. I haven't heard anyone talking about nuclear weapons, though, except the West. The only country that's ever nuked someone is the United States. They nuked 2 Japanese cities to scare the Soviets. Not even because they had to. They did it as a show of force. Just to understand how sick that is, right? They literally atomized people, burnt them to a crisp to give the Russians a show of force. So if anyone's hot-headed with the red button, I think we know who it is. If the Russians wanted to use the nuke, they could have already done that because of the economic warfare, because of all the anything else. They could have used any reason if they were really just looking to do a nuclear attack. I don't even want to talk about this. This is such an outlandish possibility. I don't even want to think about this or contemplate this. I really, really hope it doesn't get that far. Because if one country uses it, everyone's going down. This is game over for everyone. Forget about it. It will make the winter coming. It will make the sanctions that are on Russia and the backlash from that look like a joke, right? This coming winter will be a joke compared to that. So let's hope it doesn't get that far. But I think the most hypocritical of them all is Blinken and Biden. Biden came to the United Nations General Assembly and he said these words. He said, "You cannot seize a nation's territory by force." Right? He's referring to, of course, everything that's taking place in terms of these referendums. Joe Biden saying this. Right? I'll get you the clip. Actually, here you go. Just, listen how ridiculous this guy sounds.
The United States wants this war to end on just terms, on terms we all signed up for, that you cannot seize a nation's territory by force. That the only country standing in the way of that is Russia.
This is Mr. Joe Biden, who has troops right now occupying about 1/3 of Syria, the oil in Syria, they're taking it to. This is Joe Biden, who has troops in Iraq, who has very likely CIA still running around in Afghanistan. This is Joe Biden, who has 800 military bases under his watch. This is Joe Biden, who helped start the Iraq War. And now he cares about taking territory by force. What? I mean, these jokes write themselves. I have nothing to add. Nothing to add. We have someone else who joined on Patreon. I just want to say thank you very quickly to Michelle and to Meander. I hope I'm saying your name correctly. Thank you guys very much for supporting the show. I will play a crab dance for you in just a moment. And if anyone else wants to support the show, please consider donating $1 or €1 on Patreon. We are trying to hit the goal of 900 members, and that would be really, really great. Again, the link is in the description and the chat. Thank you so much for all your support. Thank you for supporting independent media. I'll play a crab dance, and then we'll get to the next topic.
Clap for that, you stupid bastard.
And Corn Pop was a bad dude. And he ran a bunch of bad boys.
Listen, fuckhead, you have fucking crossed the line. Claiming I'm the enemy. You got that, you goddamn son of a bitch?
I don't give a fuck what you think, bitch.
Good morning. Sunday morning.
Cut that bitch off.
Thank you for Iron Dome, which is a technical marvel.
والله انتوا كلاب بصراحة يعني. ماشي نشتغل عادي.
We lied, we cheated, we stole.
China.
And you ain't black.
There's always the macro and then there's the micro.
Do not come. Do not come.
I'm gonna come.
You talking to me?
Ladies and gentlemen,
I'll have two number 9s. The number 9 large.
we got him.
I told myself, I know it's not.
I've fallen and I can't get up. Disgusting!
Why you take this? Why, you're getting nervous, man. Calm down. It's okay.
Suck my dick and choke on it. I yield my time. Fuck you.
Amazing. And I've got a bunch of donations from you guys on PayPal. This is from Beer and Flies. Thank you, Beer and Flies. There's another donation here from Phil. Phil says, talk soon, Richie. Here I am. And there's another one that just came in. Hold on, I'm trying to refresh. This is from Hermione. Thank you very much, Hermione. I appreciate that. We've also got a bunch of donations on YouTube. I'll read them out to you, and then we'll go to the next segment, which of course has to do with Ukraine, right? This is all about, it's all connected, and it's all about Ukraine in the end. And if you have just joined, please let me know where you're watching from, what country, what city, what state, what town you're in. Let me know in the comments, and please remember to hit like on the video. It helps the channel to grow and fight the algorithm. We've got one here from Toilet Sauce. What an amazing name. Toilet Sauce says, you'd be surprised about how many French loan words there are in Russian. The Russian nobility used to be fluent in French. Well, they all used to be fluent in French, right? There was a time where the language of diplomacy, the aristocrats in every country, anyone anyone who's notable or worth knowing about, the lingua franca was, of course, French at one point. I suspect that's a bit why the French are sour about English. They don't like the English, they don't want to learn English, and they hate the English. And I think they're a bit bitter because people now, the lingua franca is, of course, English, not French. Language of science, language of diplomacy, everything is in English, and they don't like that anymore, because it's not French and it hurts them. Stephanie says, great stream, thank you, and hope you can get Patrick Lancaster on, who's reporting on the ground about the referenda. Duly noted. Thank you, Stephanie, for the donation. And that speaking of language, you can say referenda, but I've also heard referendums. I think English should be consistent if it's going to be the lingua franca at least. Rob says, tip for Claudia. Thank you, Richard. Thank you, and thank Claudia. We have one here from Valerie, courtesy of Riza, says, keep up the good work. Thank you, Richard and Claudia. You're very kind. Tish says the UK is Blowjo. What? Nixed the deal Russia and Ukraine agreed to this summer. The US and West have stipulated end Russia. This cannot be disputed. The EU was to be trashed so the US could control Russia's resources to sell to Europe. Well, that's funny you mentioned that because I'm literally about to talk about the trade between Russia and the EU in a second. And it's good to see you, Tish. We have Kapapa who's in the house. And they said Canada and the US are also beefing up NORAD to keep Russia busy in the Arctic. Where no one is looking. Yes, indeed. That could be very interesting. John says that's why they got rid of the draft in the US. Now Americans don't protest against war. Well, yeah, I mean, it's deeply unpopular during Vietnam, right? So they got rid of it, but now it's basically the poor draft. So they won't give you a notice, but they'll make sure you can't pay your bills, so you have no choice but to come to the army. You know. Patricia says, I've heard it's not a draft. Just calling up reservists. Also, lots of rallies in support of the referendum. Without question, I hope I made this clear. By the way, I was focusing on the Western coverage so we could try and analyze it. I just wanted to be very clear. What you said is true. You have people, for example, in Iran right now, not just protesting against the government. You have many more, actually, bigger amounts of people coming out, larger amounts of people in support of the government, in support, not against. In Russia, the same thing. You're going to have people that are protesting against the mobilization, but people also protesting in favor of. And the same thing with the referendums, people that are protesting in favor of it. And that's why I was talking about how this is a crucial moment because, you know, with a partial mobilization, Putin can gamble on maintaining popular support, which he has a lot of. Now, the argument is that if he had done a full mobilization, which perhaps is not even necessary at this point, but if he had done that, then it would be too unpopular. Nevertheless, just going back to the point that Patricia raised, you have a lot of rallies, both in Russia, both in Iran, in support of the government. Same thing when you have news stories about Syria. They only focus on the people that are against the government, not in favor of. And again, this is not about what you personally agree with. It's just observing the facts. That these governments are popular with their people, whether the State Department and the Foreign and Commonwealth Office like them or not. So, you know, you want to be objective, you got to say both. And I actually even forgot to tell you that because I was so concentrated on going through the criticisms being made, so we can be fair and unbiased, and you know. I always present everything to you before I give you my opinion. So Tish says the woman in the wheelchair has been disabled since childhood. Those receiving draft notices, like students, are only being asked to update their records. Bought time, the bully is being challenged. Okay, well that's good because I was, again, as I told you, I didn't understand why students were being given them. And yes, it's true. The woman in the wheelchair, which we were looking at, who was holding a protest sign, she wasn't in the army or in war or something. She was disabled since childhood, and basically, so there's no confusion about that. Ray says, do you believe the bullshit mainstream 9/11 narrative? There's a clip from CNN, I think it's from CNN, which I love so much, and I'm not going to say anything, I'm just going to play it to you, and allow me one moment just to answer. Hold on, just a second. You're going to love this. You're going to love this. Okay, give me a second. I know it's on YouTube, but I think I've posted it before, so I'll search for it there. Okay, hold on. No, that's not it. Dang it, man. It was so easy to find before. Where did it go? I found it. Okay, ready? It's 17 seconds. Just what?
Another development.
It's only 17 seconds.
Another development on Saturday. New York officials revealed at a news conference here in the city that a hijacker's passport was found blocks from the World Trade Center crash site, if you can believe that. No other details were given, but the discovery prompted the FBI and police to expand the search area down in Lower Manhattan.
I love the part where it says, if you can believe that. I don't know. Can you? Anyway, thank you for the donation, Ray. And Tom says, is it possible CIA up? I don't understand what you're referring to, but I got to go through it. Give me a second. Candace says, Richie, oh boy. Yes, excellent. Yes, quite. You just wanted me to do the voice. Wadeworth also sent a donation. Thank you. And Florin also sent one. Good to see you, Florin. And NB says, Iran just joined the Shanghai Cooperation Organization. And now suddenly this. Yeah, that's what I was saying. All right. Not the only reason, but worth noting. Black Phil says, if/when Russia wins the Ukraine conflict, Russia should be seen as the best military on earth. No other military faces this adversity and wins. Institutionalized says, outrage is genuine. What is geopolitical motive? Okay, well, hold on. Let me answer Black Phil quickly. I wouldn't be so sure what's going to happen, man. You could end up with a stalemate just as much as you could end up with a Russian victory or a Ukrainian one. Who the hell knows? Let's not get ahead of ourselves. But currently, I understand your point that there's all this pressure from sanctions and also military might of NATO behind Ukraine, and Russia still afloat at the very least. Yeah, that is impressive. It's also very, very dangerous, and explains why you have something like a partial mobilization, because whether you believe NATO is the cause of the war or it's Vladimir Putin because he's such a maniac, this doesn't change the fact that for Russia it is certainly existential at this point. There's no going back, unfortunately, and I say unfortunately because there should be diplomatic efforts right now, but instead we're seeing the opposite of that on every way you look at it. And speaking of war and Ukraine, let me tell you what's happening in Germany, and you're gonna understand where I'm going with this. So you probably didn't hear about this. This was reported really quietly in the news, but Germany was just forced to nationalize the gas giant Uniper. Okay? Have a guess why? Yeah, it has something to do with Ukraine. All right? It's these wonderful, lovely sanctions on Russia blowing up in their faces again. Well done. You're very smart. So, this is from CNN. Germany is nationalizing Uniper, its biggest importer of natural gas, as part of an €8 billion deal to prevent an energy shortage this winter. Europe has been hit by soaring natural gas and electricity prices. And of course, they say as a result of Russia's invasion, we all know it's because of the sanctions. The German government will hold around 99% of Uniper after injecting new capital and buying out its Finnish parent company Fortum. Uniper provides about 40% of Germany's gas supply and is crucial for large companies and private consumers in Europe's biggest economy. In July, Chancellor Olaf Scholz announced the government would step in to bail out Uniper with a package worth up to €15 billion after it was brought to its knees by months of Russian supply cuts and soaring spot market prices. And once again, when they say Russian supply cuts, Russia, the only time, as far as I can tell, that Russia weaponized, if you want to use that verb, gas was just recently when they cut Nord Stream 1. Germany is the one that canceled Nord Stream 2 2 days before the war started. Talk about shooting yourself in the foot. Oh no! If only there was this giant, enormous gas pipeline that, was right at Germany's doorstep. If only. I wonder. Russian gas has had to be substituted with costly alternatives, leading to soaring bills for consumers. And of course, they say the situation, this is from Habeck, worsened dramatically since Russia cut off gas supply to Europe through Nord Stream 1 indefinitely on September 1st, citing an oil leak. Russia basically said that if you don't lift the sanctions, the pipeline's not turning back on. Although gas supplies through Nord Stream 1 are suspended, Germany's gas reserves are filled at more than 90% capacity. Still, the energy crisis is not going away. Germany can get through the winter well without Russian gas, but Habeck is warning of really empty supply levels in the period thereafter. EU states and the UK have together committed more than $500 billion in assistance to households and businesses to help them cope with the soaring cost of energy. They talk about Britain capping electricity and gas costs for businesses at less than half the market rate, so that's for 6 months. And then they will also do it for households, capping it at £2,500 for the next 2 years. So, guess what's happened at the same time? It's not just Germany that's had to nationalize its gas giant. The French are also in big trouble, and they have now decided to nationalize Électricité de France, so EDF, right? Basically, the French, their power grid is based off of nuclear energy. So 71% of the electricity in France comes from nuclear reactors. And the French are in big trouble because, number one, even if most of their electricity comes from nuclear, guess what? More than half of their reactors are offline because they're undergoing maintenance. Talk about crappy luck. On top of that, the rivers are running dry, so hydro is also out of the question. And if you wanted to, if you were thinking of getting gas, natural gas to substitute it, well, guess what? The price of gas is, is shot up. It's through the roof. So they're also in trouble, and now the French government has gone and nationalized Électricité de France. So same situation like in Germany, right? You have European governments taking control of their energy giants because the sanctions on Russia have completely blown up in their faces, and they have egg on their face, really. So this is from Oil Price, and they talk about how the French government already owns the majority, so 84% of Électricité de France, but is now planning to fully nationalize the company, right? And that's as they're warning of 29 billion euros in losses. I mean, that's astronomical. Nuclear power generation is now at an all-time low, and I love this part here in brackets. She says, normally here we would say how much 29 billion euros is in dollars, but the European economy has taken such a downturn, largely thanks to energy woes, that the values of the euro and the dollar are virtually identical. She's absolutely correct. So more than half of EDF's 56 nuclear reactors are offline, a record shortage. The industry is dealing with a pileup of delays and stoppages thanks to the pandemic, a series of maintenance issues, including corrosion at some of France's aging reactors, troubles at state-controlled energy group EDF, and a years-long absence of significant new nuclear investment. So, as I was talking about, the rivers running dry in Europe, some French and Swiss nuclear plants don't even have enough water to keep their systems cool. That's another problem, right? Generally, France exports energy thanks to its robust and reliable nuclear sector. Now it's being forced to import energy in a historically tight market. Energy prices are soaring, and of course, we look at Gazprom, which is the Russian state-owned gas company. They've indefinitely cut off natural gas supply to the continent via Nord Stream 1, citing maintenance issues. Now, again, me personally, I don't believe that this is because of maintenance only. The Russians, for 6 months, they were giving gas to Europe. They never tried to cut off the gas or weaponize it. And, I think I mean, the fact that they were still giving Europe any gas after 6 packages of sanctions, you're lucky, honestly. You're lucky they gave you anything at all. They talk about Russia weaponizing energy against Europe. Europe is the one that's trying to cut off Russian revenue. They're explicitly saying, we don't want your gas. We don't want your oil. And when you sell oil and gas overseas, we want to make sure there's no revenue for you. We're going to put a price cap on you. This infrastructure that you spent years building, Nord Stream 2, we don't want it. Russia never said zero gas. We're turning it off after the sanctions started in February. So, their chronology is entirely messed up. They're trying to build some fake narrative. It's just nonsense. Russia has no interest in weaponizing energy. They want the revenue. Anyway. So that's France being screwed, right? And of course, who's making money from this? The United States. I told you many months ago, when you have a shortage of gas, you're going to have people trying to bring liquefied natural gas into the continent. So I just thought I'd show you this from last month from Business Insider. Look at the headline. Energy traders are making a killing exporting U.S. natural gas to Europe as prices soar, with some single shipments bringing in $200 million. That's very impressive. That's very impressive. Energy companies and traders are raking in huge profits selling U.S. natural gas to Europe as prices on the continent skyrocket. U.S. exports of natural gas across the Atlantic have surged this year as companies pounce on the huge earnings on offer, while European governments facing a Russian supply squeeze desperately try to fill their storage tanks before winter. Quote, you're not talking about a margin, you're talking about a multiplier, says Segalin, an energy investment banker who hosts the Redefining Energy podcast. He told Business Insider that all in all, it is insane. Companies with gas to sell in the US can fill a large ship and send it across the Atlantic for around $60 million, with the cargo then fetching around $275 million in Europe. Buyers who locked in deals to purchase this U.S. natural gas before the latest surge in European prices would also be making huge profits. So, again, just a little bit of the, the so-called bright side or silver lining for those very few on the top who are making money. I want to show you this from the New York Times. They're saying that in France, because of the gas shortages, even though 90% of France's storage facilities are full, energy bills for households and businesses have soared. Okay, so in France, they have the biggest nuclear energy arsenal, not weapons. They have the biggest nuclear energy arsenal of any European country, and they're one of the least reliant on Russian natural gas. But as I was just telling you, most of their reactors are offline, and the output from nuclear energy is the lowest it's been in 3 decades. France's worst drought in 30 years this summer has also lowered river levels, cutting supplies of hydroelectric power. Right, so those are 2 things impacted by rivers running dry. So France now faces the unsettling prospect of initiating rolling blackouts in winter and having to import power or resort to coal-fired plants to meet its energy needs. Scenarios the government is desperate to avoid. And then here they talk about how all these energy-intensive companies like steel and chemical and glass makers, they're basically having to lay off a bunch of their employees. This maker of glasses for, that they use in bistros and so on, they're putting their furnaces on standby for 4 months, and 250 employees to save cash are on furlough. They talk about another maker of goblets, 1,650 out of 5,000 employees put on partial furlough. It's basically the lovely Russian sanctions obviously working very well. And the funniest thing to me, besides the sentence I read to you, where the French are considering returning to coal, right, and burning firewood, it's not a joke, right? There are schools in France that are actually preparing to burn firewood because of how bad it is. Here's this also from the New York Times. Guess what Germany's doing? Germany, that's been railing about nuclear energy for decades, they suddenly are going to they suddenly put off closing 2 of their nuclear reactors. Can you imagine? So they were set to close them this year, and now all of a sudden they want to run them and keep them open because they've screwed themselves. I mean, I've never seen such stupidity in my entire life. You have a huge gas pipeline, Nord Stream 2, at your doorstep, straight from Russia, and you not only close that, you go and slap the Russians with sanctions so they close Nord Stream 1, and then you go back to coal? What is this, like, pre-industrial revolution challenge? What are they doing? These people are so stupid. They are so stupid. It's unbelievable. I have never seen a bigger case of someone shooting themselves in the foot. Unreal. They've achieved nothing. They've achieved absolutely nothing. They have to spend all this money bailing out their energy giants. There's not enough energy. The facilities are full, but the bills are still high. Oil prices are through the roof. Russia's still making bank, and you have to now keep nuclear facilities open after telling people for 2 decades that you hate nuclear energy. Or you can go back to coal. That's also another, 19th century challenge. I mean, this is really the brilliance of European politicians. You can see they're so smart. They have everything under control, right? Everything's going well. Wow. And you guys know, I've just talked to you about Germany and France. We talked about the UK as well. You have businesses closing down. Their energy bills have tripled. It's a complete disaster, even within the EU and without. So this is only going to get worse, in my opinion. And I think it's very tragic, and it's I'm speechless. I'm literally speechless. Here, let me show you something else. Speaking of brilliance. So this is, as you guys know, in the span of a week, the UK has a new monarch. Apparently, this guy's the king. I don't remember voting for him. And we also have a new prime minister, okay? So Charles III and Liz Truss. Queen Elizabeth II is gone, and Bojo is gone. And now Liz Truss has said that she is considering moving the British embassy to Jerusalem, right? Which is the equivalent of basically taking the UN Charter, ripping it up, slapping Syria in the face, Palestine in the face, and so on and so on. Why is this a big issue? The only person that's ever done that is Donald Trump, right? I made a video on this channel, and I think the title is something like Donald Trump was a huge gift to Israel. It's true. He did so many things for them, right? He got Bahrain and the UAE to normalize ties. He moved the U.S. embassy to Jerusalem. He recognized Israeli occupation of Syria's Golan Heights, right? He basically said that, yeah, this huge chunk of valuable land that has water and snow and oil, it's not Syrian anymore, like the whole world agrees. No, it's yours. It's Israel's, right? And I highlight this again. Why? Because right now you have these referendums in Ukraine where everyone is yelling that it's illegal and Russia's going to annex them illegally. They didn't seem to give a crap when Israel annexed the Syrian Golan Heights. They still don't give a crap. But anyway, one of the things Donald Trump did is he moved the embassy, and now she wants to do it, right? So this is a post from the current caretaker Israeli Prime Minister Yair Lapid. It's in Hebrew. I translated it with Google. Obviously, I didn't need to because there are many articles about this. He's just thanking her for considering this move. And there's an official statement from number 10 from Downing Street where they say the Prime Minister informed Prime Minister Lapid, so the Israeli, about her review of the current location of the British Embassy in Israel. The Prime Minister welcomed progress on a new free trade agreement. God, I'll get to that in a second. But I find this hilarious because they made Brexit out to be like some amazing venture that, once the UK is out of the EU, it doesn't need to trade with the EU. It doesn't need its biggest trading partner. It can go and make free trade deals with Australia. And now Israel, apparently. What are they going to export? Stolen hummus made on illegal settlements? Apartheid? Oh, no, I remember we exported that there. So they also mention at the bottom the close ties between British and Israeli people. Yeah, that's a nice way of putting it. basically Britain and France, they carved up the Middle East. They all took a chunk of it. The British took Palestine, and then in 1917, there's this Balfour Declaration from the British government where they're saying that we're going to give the Jews a homeland in Palestine, as if it's theirs to give away, right? And then these two things that happened in 1916, 1917, they basically lay the groundwork for Israel, right? And the idea, it's really ironic to me because actually the whole idea behind it is racist from the British standpoint. They basically did not want Jews in Britain, and so their idea of getting rid of them was to give them Palestine. Like how, and then they call Palestinians anti-Semitic. I mean, this is incredible to me. But close ties, Liz Truss, the new prime minister, her idol is Margaret Thatcher, right? And Margaret Thatcher was the first British prime minister to actually meet with the Israelis. And she met not only with the Israelis, but one of the people who was responsible for bombing the King David Hotel in Jerusalem, where they killed a dozen plus British officers, right? They basically bombed the headquarters of the British forces there. And it's straight up terrorism, right? And she went and met with them. I mean, I'm just stunned. I'm really stunned. So this whole relationship is disgusting. It's basically Britain giving away land that doesn't belong to it to the Israelis, and the Israelis, remember, they were assassinating before there was Israel. They had the Haganah, Hashomir. These were like the Zionist paramilitary groups. They were assassinating non-Zionist Jews. So if you're Jewish but you don't support Israel, they'll go and kill you. If you're British, they'll kill you too. If you're Arab, they'll kill you too. This whole like mentality of assassinating people you don't like, it's to this day they still do it, right? It's unparalleled, I would say, really. I mean, obviously, the CIA, MI6 don't have a shortage of assassinations, but the Israelis, when they killed someone in Dubai, they even used British passports. They forged passports of their own allies. So when I see these close ties, I mean, I'm just like, what close ties? Which ones? And, her moving the embassy to Jerusalem, let me tell you why this is so egregious, is because the UN said that Jerusalem should be corpus separatum, which is Latin for separate body. So it's not capital of Israel, it's not capital of Palestine, it's nobody's. Because, the Muslims, the Christians, the Jews, for them, Jerusalem is an important city for all three of those religions. So, it's for everybody. It's going to have a special status of being a separate body and a holy city and so on. And of course, the Israelis illegally annexed it, right? Speaking of illegal annexations, they violated multiple United Nations Security Council resolutions, specifically telling them that this annexation is null and void. Those are the exact words. And the United Kingdom, being a permanent member on the United Nations Security Council, is one of the countries that agreed to this and is a founding member of the United Nations. So I'm really puzzled how the UK and the US, they come out and say, that's illegal. You cannot have Jerusalem. And now, a couple decades later, they're suddenly changing their mind because international law doesn't matter. They don't care about international law. They don't care about their own fucking statements. They just care about whatever is good today, whatever they feel like today, right? That's why you pay attention. They never say international law. They say international order, whatever that means. And so this is basically, it's another slap in the face for the Palestinians. The Palestinians have been denied their land. They're denied their human rights. You can pick any NGO that you like, and they will all tell you that Israel is apartheid, and they treat Palestinians like they're not even human beings. And this is against what the UN said. And remember, the Israelis, what do they tell you? They say, well, Israel has a right to exist because the partition plan was approved by the UN. Yeah, guess what? The partition plan also says that Jerusalem is a separate body, and you didn't mind annexing it. You see how they play these games, right? They just bend the law as they see fit. And the Palestinians get nothing. They're still under occupation. Syria is still under occupation. And then they go and tell you, oh, look what's happening. The Russians are illegally annexing Ukraine. They're violating international law. Yeah, what about this? What about this? You guys, thank you so much for all your support. There are too many donations to go through. But again, if you want to support independent media, please consider subscribing on Patreon for $1 a month. If you like my work, this is how you can support it. And if you want, you can just send a one-time donation on PayPal with a question or a remark or a note, and I will read it. Here's the QR codes. And again, I'm very grateful for all of you tuning in. Let me know in the comments, where are you tuning in from? And I'm actually curious, did you get a notification? Because I feel like there are more people this time around. Last time I felt like the video was being throttled, but I'm glad to see you all here. And again, thank you all for liking the videos and for, basically helping the channel to grow. Again, this is the QR code. And Claudia is really great. She's been posting all the links all day inside the chat, and I'm going to post them myself now. Here's a donation. This is from Mark. Mark said, keep up the good work. And I appreciate that, Mark. Thank you very much. I think it was sent double, actually, if I'm not mistaken. I'm refreshing on YouTube, and we have one from Bruno. Bruno sent a sticker that I cannot read because it's too tiny, but thank you for the super sticker. Okay, that's very good. That's very good. A lot of you are saying that you got notifications. Very good. Very good. There's Telegram and email. If you are not getting notifications on YouTube, you can subscribe there and you will get them. And by the way, check if you're subscribed. Some of you told me that you got unsubscribed, which is weird. But please check that you are still subscribed. That is important. And again, thank you to everybody very, very much. That's it for me. I'm just making sure the outro is good. Yeah, so that's it for me for now, and I'll see you guys next time. Take care, ma salame, and bye-bye. In the last couple of months, you've seen them sanction Russia, and what has that done? It's driven the value of the ruble up. The euro and the dollar are down. Russia has made even more money than it was making before because the Europeans are still buying the oil. The rest of the world is still buying the oil, and the price of oil and the price of gas have gone up. So even if Russia is selling less oil and less gas, the fact that the price has gone up means that Russia is making more, there's more revenue, okay? So they've come up with a new plan. This is their new brilliant plan. The crude cap applying from December 5th and the refined products to follow from February 5th, 2023. If you want to go and move Russian oil, you need to get a ship, and you need to get that ship and the cargo insured. The idea is that they will refuse to move your Russian oil unless you bought it at a price per barrel that is below this threshold. I can already tell you one thing: the Chinese are never going to go along with this price cap. A price cap on Russian oil without the price of oil skyrocketing. It's just not happening, man. The EU now wants to replace Russian gas with Israeli gas, right? There's nothing better than some stolen Lebanese gas. And the Israelis are trying their best to block the nuclear deal because, if sanctions are lifted on Iran, Iran is free to sell its oil and gas. Remember, Iran has the biggest gas reserves in the world after Russia. And what do the Israelis do? They straight up just send a giant ship to start extracting the gas. I mean, this thing is a behemoth. Nasrallah, who is the Secretary General of Hezbollah, he threatened them that if they extract any gas before they solve the maritime border dispute, there's going to be a huge response. If Israel messes with Lebanon and starts extracting gas before this issue has been resolved, they're going to strike the Israeli gas rigs. And no company is going to want to come anywhere near that because it's a war zone then. Let me show you this opinion piece I found in The Guardian. The ruble is soaring and Putin is stronger than ever. Our sanctions have backfired. Wow, you don't say. Took you 5 months to realize that? Western sanctions against Russia are the most ill-conceived and counterproductive policy in recent international history. The reality of sanctions on Russia is that they invite retaliation. Putin is free to freeze Europe this winter. He has slashed supply from major pipelines such as Nord Stream 1 by up to 80%. The chief beneficiary is none other than Russia, whose energy exports to Asia have soared, driving its balance of payments into unprecedented surplus. Man, seriously, did I not say exactly all of this months ago? Perhaps, after all, we should stick to war. I don't agree with everything in this article, but the premise that sanctions have failed, absolutely. I mean, this was clear from the beginning, man. They're attacking India again for buying Russian oil. Now, again, think of how the United States and the West are. They thought, okay, we're going to sanction Russia, and then Russia's economy is going to be destroyed. And now Russia is moving more amounts of oil towards the east than it did before. And India is buying this up at a discount. The Ukrainian foreign minister, look what he says to India. He says that every barrel of Russian oil delivered to India has quote-unquote Ukrainian blood on it. They're shipping Russian oil to the United States via India. They just send it to India, and then in India they mix it in with something else, right? So chemically speaking, it's not exactly 100% the same as it came in from Russia. Western European countries and the United States want to go lecture India for buying the same oil as them. The West still consuming Russian oil, and then they have the nerve to lecture India for doing the same. Europe needs a gas supplier. Israel, I mean, no matter what it wants to do, it's not just about the money. Let me explain this, man, because the Israelis, for them, it's not that they need the money desperately like Lebanon. They want people to legitimize them, to validate them. They want to have the prestige of being, oh, we're an official energy supplier to the European Union. Remember, when you're supplying resources that are so crucial, like oil, like gas, you know, this gives you power. It is power. And they want to kneecap Iran in every way, whether it's gas, whether it's oil, whatever it is, whether it's foreign investments. Remember how many companies lost billions that they invested in Iran? There is a serious will to cooperate with Iran, but the Israelis hate that. They want to be the number one in the region. Gennady Gatilov, who is Russia's permanent representative to the United Nations in Geneva, that just means that he's an ambassador. He said that the world has changed and the UN will never be the same as it was before. These UN votes, remember, there were multiple resolutions to condemn Russia, to ask Russia to end the invasion and so on. India that didn't do it, China that didn't do it, and only South Africa condemning Russia. That's very huge. They want to deal with Russia. Doesn't mean they like the war, but they're not going to go and like cancel Russia. Although overwhelmingly those countries at the UN did vote to condemn Russia, the ones that didn't have very powerful economies or vast resources, or both. Of course, that includes Iran as well, Iraq. They all refuse to condemn Russia. I think I understand what he's saying, that, oh, the UN will never be the same. I get the feeling it's the same with the European Western society, the economy. This is all going to go down the drain. A lot of people are going to get hurt, which is very unfortunate. In the last couple of months, you've seen them sanction Russia, and what has that done? It's driven the value of the ruble up. The euro and the dollar are down. Russia has made even more money than it was making before because the Europeans are still buying the oil. The rest of the world is still buying the oil, and the price of oil and the price of gas have gone up. So even if Russia's selling less oil and less gas, the fact that the price has gone up means that Russia's making more, there's more revenue, okay? So they've come up with a new plan. This is their new brilliant plan. The crude cap applying from December 5th, and the refined products to follow from February 5th, 2023. If you want to go and move Russian oil, you need to get a ship, and you need to get that ship and the cargo insured. The idea is that they will refuse to move your Russian oil unless you bought it at a price per barrel that is below this threshold. I can already tell you one thing: the Chinese are never going to go along with this price cap. A price cap on Russian oil without the price of oil skyrocketing. It's just not happening, man. The EU now wants to replace Russian gas with Israeli gas, right? There's nothing better than some stolen Lebanese gas. And the Israelis are trying their best to block the nuclear deal because, you know, if sanctions are lifted on Iran, Iran is free to sell its oil and gas. Remember, Iran has the biggest gas reserves in the world after Russia. And what do the Israelis do? They straight up just send a giant ship to start extracting the gas. I mean, this thing is a behemoth. You know, Nasrallah, who is the Secretary General of Hezbollah, he threatened them that if they extract any gas before they solve the maritime border dispute, there's going to be a huge response. If Israel messes with Lebanon and starts extracting gas before this issue has been resolved, they're gonna strike the Israeli gas rigs, and no company is gonna want to come anywhere near that because it's a war zone then. Let me show you this opinion piece I found in The Guardian. The ruble is soaring and Putin is stronger than ever. Our sanctions have backfired. Wow, you don't say. Took you 5 months to realize that? Western sanctions against Russia are the most ill-conceived and counterproductive policy in recent international history. The reality of sanctions on Russia is that they invite retaliation. Putin is free to freeze Europe this winter. He has slashed supply from major pipelines such as Nord Stream 1 by up to 80%. The chief beneficiary is none other than Russia, whose energy exports to Asia have soared, driving its balance of payments into unprecedented surplus. Man, seriously, did I not say exactly all of this months ago? Perhaps, after all, we should stick to war. I don't agree with everything in this article, but the premise that sanctions have failed, absolutely. I mean, this was clear from the beginning, man. They're attacking India again for buying Russian oil. Now, again, think of how the United States and the West are. They thought, okay, we're going to sanction Russia, and then Russia's economy is going to be destroyed. And what the hell are you guys still doing here? You know, when you watch those movies in the cinema, and then you have to watch through the whole credits, and then suddenly there's like an extra scene at the end for 5 seconds. This is one of those scenes. No, I'm kidding. Stay. You're all welcome. But I just want to let you know I'll be back tomorrow around 5 p.m. East. Okay, so 11 p.m. Paris time, 5 p.m. East Coast. Okay, and I'm gonna do something really enjoyable. I'm gonna be with my cousin, and we're gonna shit all over this. I'm not gonna spoil it. You'll see. Just be here. Anyway, I'll see you guys tomorrow. I'm glad you're all here. It's great. It's great to see you. I was just thinking about all these topics we went through. Man, what a bunch of bullshit. Really, just so much crap happening. You know, the worst one that I'm still thinking about is the sanctions. These morons, they completely ruined everything. You know, you got this perfect, enormous, literally brand new pipeline going all the way from Russia to Germany on a silver platter. And 2 days before the war, remember, before the war, there was no Russian invasion. The Germans say, you know what? We don't want this. We're going to tear it up. Actually, I'm pretty sure the Germans wanted it, but their masters in New York and Washington told them no. So they completely discarded this brand new pipeline, and then they slap Russia with not 1, not 2, but 5 rounds of sanctions. And then they wonder why the Russians are, after 6 months, right, cutting off the gas. After 6 months. And even before, they were twisting things in such a weird way. Like Russia would say, we're not going to charge you extra. It's the same price, what we agreed on. Just pay us in rubles because you guys keep stealing our money when it's in your banks. So now you're going to pay us in our currency in our banks. And then they say, oh my God, Russia's cutting the gas. No, you didn't pay. Like, what do you expect? Free gas? I don't know any country that gives free gas. I know imperialists would love, you know, they salivate at the prospect of free oil and gas. They love this. It's a dream come true. But no, sadly, I don't think that Putin and his Russian playbook, I love this phrase, they have free gas written in there. I'm sorry, they don't. So the way they twist things, you already know that these people are not being truthful. There's something wrong with them, you know, in the media and these like EU politicians. Ursula. So there's something wrong there, and I told you, man, look at these prices going through the roof. That's going to hurt everyone. And now it's the losses are so big, they're so tremendous that even with the government help from the French government, from the British government, from the French government, all of these countries, you saw collectively it's about $500 billion worth of aid that they've given to households and businesses in Europe. Even with all of this help, the French and Germans still have to go and bail out their energy giants because of the idiots that they are, because of their stupid sanctions on Russia, which have completely backfired. I mean, this is another thing I wanted to say, which is, when we talk about who's winning the war, it's very easy to look at a map and say, oh, well, Ukrainian troops took this much territory. The purple blob is getting bigger. Obviously, they are winning. Yeah, sure. Those are territorial gains. But you don't fight a war just on the battlefield. You fight economic warfare. I mean, I'm not saying it's a good thing, but they are doing it. It's a fact. They are fighting economic warfare against Russia. And are things going the way they planned? No, not really. It doesn't mean sanctions don't hurt. They do. But the ruble is up. It's the best performing currency of the year. The euro is in the trash, right? The pound is at its worst in like 25, 30 years, something obscene like in the 1980s. And it's the European governments that cannot afford to pay for the energy because they willingly, stupidly cut off their main supplier for no reason whatsoever, and they're losing this game. So when we talk about who's winning the war, you should look at the economic dimension, and in that dimension, I would say that it is not going the way the Europeans planned it, just putting it mildly. Okay, just wanted to say that quickly. And this mobilization, the referendums, that's another dimension which I just spent an hour talking about. But always think of the economic one. That's very important. That's very important. There's another thing very quickly. The meeting that Putin had with Modi, so the Indian Prime Minister, on the sidelines of the SCO, the Shanghai Cooperation Organization. This was in Samarkand, and on the sidelines, he held meetings not just with the Indians, with the Chinese as well. And the coverage in the Western press is basically that, oh my God, he was smashed, slashed, cut, sliced, and diced into a million pieces. Modi sat down and just bitch slapped him and told him that, India is against the war and all this stuff. Can I tell you, honestly, I could not find one single translation of Modi. I just want to watch the video. I don't want to hear what someone anchor at CNN, who is obviously biased, is saying. I just want the video. I couldn't find it. So all we have now is we have to listen to the interpretation of the English translation from CNN anchors. I saw comments on Twitter. Again, this is completely anecdotal, but I saw comments on Twitter of people saying that they need to learn how to speak Hindi because that is not what he was saying. The tone in which he said it was different, right? And I know because I speak multiple languages, tone, enunciation, intonation makes complete difference. You can accentuate one word and change the entire meaning of the sentence. Either way, I don't see what the huge controversy is here. Obviously, India and China are going to tell Putin privately and publicly that the war should end because it's bad for everyone. The thing is, though, what they're not understanding is they are so like the way that the Western press work. It's like high school gossip, They can't analyze properly. They can't look at the larger, the bigger picture and what's happening. Let's look at it this way: is India still buying the Russian oil? Yes. Did India buy more Russian oil than it used to after the war began? Yes. Did India refuse to sanction Russia? Yes. China. Remember, there's this phrase that they use about the friendship with no limits, right? Between China and Russia. Has that changed? I don't see anything changing here. I see Western press like blowing something out of proportion. Give me something concrete. When you come and tell me, oh, India is sanctioning Russia or India stopped buying Russian oil, then I will be like, okay, yeah, there's a policy shift here. But what I'm seeing now is just Western gossip, high school coverage. That's it. And I could be wrong, but please provide me with otherwise. I would be more than happy to watch the clip in its original translation. All right, guys. I told you I'd see you tomorrow. Take care. Bye-bye. In the last couple of months, you've seen them sanction Russia. And what has that done? It's driven the value of the ruble up. The euro and the dollar are down. Russia has made even more money than it was making before because the Europeans are still buying the oil. The rest of the world is still buying the oil, and the price of oil and the price of gas have gone up. So even if Russia's selling less oil and less gas, the fact that the price has gone up means that Russia's making more, there's more revenue, okay? So they've come up with a new plan. This is their new brilliant plan. The crude cap applying from December 5th, and the refined products to follow from February 5th, 2023. If you want to go and move Russian oil, you need to get a ship, and you need to get that ship and the cargo insured. The idea is that they will refuse to move your Russian oil unless you bought it at a price per barrel that is below this threshold. I can already tell you one thing, the Chinese are never going to go along with this price cap. A price cap on Russian oil without the price of oil skyrocketing. It's just not happening, man. The EU now wants to replace Russian gas with Israeli gas, right? There's nothing better than some stolen Lebanese gas. And the Israelis are trying their best to block the nuclear deal because, you know, if sanctions are lifted on Iran, Iran is free to sell its oil and gas. Remember, Iran has the biggest gas reserves in the world after Russia. And what do the Israelis do? They straight up just send a giant ship to start extracting the gas. I mean, this thing is a behemoth. You know, Nasrallah, who is the Secretary General of Hezbollah, he threatened them that if they extract any gas before they solve the maritime border dispute, there's going to be a huge response. If Israel messes with Lebanon and starts extracting gas before this issue has been resolved, they're going to strike the Israeli gas rigs. And no company is going to want to come anywhere near that because it's a war zone then. Let me show you this opinion piece I found in The Guardian. The ruble is soaring and Putin is stronger than ever. Our sanctions have backfired. Wow, you don't say. Took you 5 months to realize that? Western sanctions against Russia are the most ill-conceived and counterproductive policy in recent international history. The reality of sanctions on Russia is that they invite retaliation. Putin is free to freeze Europe this winter. He has slashed supply from major pipelines such as Nord Stream 1 by up to 80%. The chief beneficiary is none other than Russia, whose energy exports to Asia have soared, driving its balance of payments into unprecedented surplus. Man, seriously, did I not say exactly all of this months ago? Perhaps after all, we should stick to war. I don't agree with everything in this article, but the premise that sanctions have failed, absolutely. I mean, this was clear from the beginning, man. They're attacking India again for buying Russian oil. Now, again, think of how the United States and the West are. They thought, okay, we're going to sanction Russia, and then Russia's economy is going to be destroyed. And now Russia is moving more amounts of oil towards the east than it did before. And India is buying this up at a discount. The Ukrainian foreign minister, look what he says to India. He says that every barrel of Russian oil delivered to India has quote-unquote Ukrainian blood on it. They're shipping Russian oil to the United States via India. They just send it to India, and then in India they mix it in with something else, right? So chemically speaking, it's not exactly 100% the same as it came in from Russia. Western European countries and the United States want to go lecture India for buying the same oil as them. The West still consuming Russian oil, and then they have the nerve to lecture India for doing the same. Europe needs a gas supplier. Israel, I mean, no matter what it wants to do, it's not just about the money. Let me explain this, man, because the Israelis, for them, it's not that they need the money desperately like Lebanon. They want people to legitimize them, to validate them. They want to have the prestige of being, oh, we're an official energy supplier. to the European Union. Remember, when you are supplying resources that are so crucial, like oil, like gas, you know, this gives you power. It is power. And they want to kneecap Iran in every way, whether it's gas, whether it's oil, whatever it is, whether it's foreign investments. Remember how many companies lost billions that they invested in Iran? There is a serious will to cooperate with Iran, but the Israelis hate that. They want to be the number one in the region.